imaginary mentor. Creating an imaginary mentor is one of the most profound psychological survival tricks that few people ever think to use, but it can mean the difference between despair and endurance in moments of isolation. When you're cut off from support, overwhelmed by uncertainty, or lost in a mental fog, this technique gives you access to clarity, wisdom, and strength that feels external, even though it comes from deep within. At its heart, this trick is about deliberately constructing a figure, real or fictional, living or dead, who embodies the qualities you most need in the moment. Think of someone who would guide you without judgment, someone who has already faced immense hardship and come through it with grace or grit. It might be a war-hardened soldier, a fearless grandmother, a stoic philosopher, or a version of your future self who's already survived everything you're facing now. This mentor becomes your invisible advisor, and you engage them in inner dialogue. When panic rises, you don't simply ask, "What should I do?" You ask your mentor. You hear their calm voice. You see them standing by you, unshaken. You borrow their strength. This imagined relationship offers emotional regulation, guidance, and companionship. It transforms solitude into mentorship. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagined and real interactions, meaning this mentor can actually change your physiology, lowering cortisol, restoring confidence, and anchoring your focus. In survival, believing that someone wise is walking with you, whispering solutions when all seems lost, can silence fear and reignite willpower. It isn't fantasy, it's neurohacking. It's how the lonely survive when no one else shows up. Mentally rehearse extreme outcomes to desensitize fear. Mentally rehearsing extreme outcomes is a psychological survival method that turns fear from a tormentor into a teacher. Most people try to avoid thinking about worst-case scenarios, believing that doing so will protect them from panic. But in survival, ignorance breeds helplessness. The truth is, when you stare down the abyss in your mind, again and again, you rob it of its power. What once felt unbearable becomes familiar. What once triggered anxiety becomes a script you've already rehearsed. This technique is not about pessimism or inviting doom. It's about building immunity. When you mentally walk through a terrifying event, step by step, you begin to detach the emotion from the event itself. You stop flinching from the image. You stop feeling ambushed by your imagination. You become the director of your fear, not its victim. You visualize the storm, the injury, the failure, the betrayal, whatever it is, and then you navigate through it. You decide how you respond, how you regroup, how you survive. You do it 1,000 times in your mind. So, if it ever happens in real life, you are already trained. This kind of mental exposure rewires your nervous system. It makes your heart beat slower in the face of threats. It gives your mind something to do instead of freeze. It says, "I have been here before," and that feeling, that eerie sense of readiness when chaos erupts, is the difference between falling apart and staying alive. Desensitization is not numbness. It's strength forged in imagination. Invent a structured routine, even without external cues. Inventing a structured routine when the world around you offers none is one of the most life-saving psychological tricks in environments of isolation, chaos, or crisis. When all normal cues vanish, no clocks, no calendar, no job to show up to, or social expectations to keep you in rhythm, your mind begins to drift into fragmentation. Days blur, motivation decays, you forget how to act like a human being. But routine is not just for productivity, it is survival scaffolding for your sanity. Without structure, the mind dissolves into a timeless fog, and time itself becomes a trap. Morning blends into night, and without something to mark progress, even a single day can feel eternal. But when you create a routine, no matter how artificial, you reassert control over your environment. You anchor your mind to purpose. You restore a sense of flow and consequence. It doesn't matter if it's fabricated. You wake up and brush your teeth, even if there's no one to see you. You walk imaginary laps at the same hour each day. You write, stretch, clean, reflect, all on cue. Maybe Monday is for planning, Tuesday for reading, Wednesday for body training, and so on. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. The ritual is what matters. Each repeated act becomes a statement. I am still here. I still choose. Routine is proof of will. It is order born from nothing. In survival, it becomes your compass in the void, a rhythm that drowns out hopelessness and reminds you that you are not lost, even if the world has gone silent. Narrate your actions aloud to stay focused. Narrating your actions aloud may seem strange, even childish, but in high-stress or isolating survival situations, it becomes a lifeline to mental clarity. When fear fogs the brain, when fatigue begins to blur the line between memory and hallucination, and when motivation fades into numbness, the simple act of speaking your thoughts out loud keeps your consciousness tethered to the present moment. It stops you from drifting, saying what you're doing as you do it. I'm tying this knot now. I'm walking to the ridge. I'm boiling water for 5 minutes. Pulls you out of autopilot. It sharpens your awareness. And more importantly, it keeps your mind from wandering into panic, depression, or distraction. In situations where a single mistake can spiral into disaster, vocalizing each step forces intentionality. It turns survival into something deliberate instead of reactive. There's also a psychological comfort in hearing your own voice. In absolute silence or isolation, the human brain starts to crave connection. Your voice becomes that connection. It's the sound of someone still trying, still alert, still thinking. Even if you're completely alone, this trick gives the illusion of conversation, a subtle way to fight off the crushing loneliness that creeps in after long periods of silence. And when you're afraid, narrating aloud becomes a stabilizer. You tell yourself what to do, and you hear that instruction. Keep walking, just breathe, step by step. It's the voice of order against the scream of chaos. It reminds you that no matter what's happening, you still have control over the next action. And sometimes that's enough to keep going. Use clockless time chunks. Break time into events rather than hours. Using clockless time chunks is a psychological tactic that becomes vital when traditional timekeeping loses meaning. During isolation, captivity, deep wilderness, or extended survival scenarios, when you're detached from clocks, schedules, and the rhythms of normal life, your mind can quickly lose its grip on sequence, urgency, and purpose. Hours stretch, days smear together. Time, once a structure, becomes a void, and the void consumes motivation. To fight this, you abandon the tyranny of hours and begin organizing time by events, things you define. You stop caring about 2 p.m. or 7 a.m., and instead, you live in chunks. Wake-up routine, post-walk reflection, after-fire building, pre-sleep journaling. Time is now made of meaning, not minutes. You tie it to what happens, not what the clock says. This approach creates internal structure. It shrinks time into manageable frames. Instead of asking, how long until nightfall, you ask, what do I do after I finish this next task? It quiets anxiety by narrowing focus. It lets you live rhythmically without being swallowed by uncertainty. You can stack meaningful rituals between meals, tasks, or even emotional cycles, like a calm block, a movement block, a reflection block. The human brain is not built for timelessness. When robbed of chronological anchors, we begin to psychologically unravel. But when you carve your own events into the day, small, repeatable, predictable, you reintroduce a sense of forward motion. You make progress visible. You feel less lost. Clockless time chunks give you the power to shape your own world inside the chaos, where the only time that matters is the time between now and your next act of survival. Assign symbolic meaning to objects to anchor your identity. Assigning symbolic meaning to objects is one of the most quietly powerful psychological survival tools a person can use when everything else starts to unravel. In moments of extreme disconnection, whether you're trapped in isolation, fighting to stay sane in a collapsing environment, or just struggling to remember who you are, objects can become anchors, not because of what they are, but because of what they mean to you. This technique taps into the ancient, instinctual part of the human mind that finds safety in symbols. When you're stripped of comfort, routine, and even people, identity begins to erode. But by assigning deep personal significance to ordinary things, a rock, a thread, a note, a piece of fabric, you create physical touch points for meaning. That stone isn't just a stone, it becomes the weight I carry but won't drop. That twig becomes the line I won't cross. That worn glove becomes the hand of someone I promised I'd return to. These aren't just metaphors. Your brain responds to them as if they were sacred. When you assign meaning to something, you breathe life into it, and it gives life back to you in moments you feel like disappearing. You hold it, and suddenly you remember your values, your strength, your story. Objects like these become spiritual totems in a world gone cold, unchanging reminders of who you are beneath the fear. They don't have to be pretty, they just have to be yours, because sometimes when the world forgets you, it's the small, sacred thing in your pocket that says, "You're still real." Invent a mission or purpose, even if arbitrary. Inventing a mission or purpose, no matter how arbitrary, is one of the most psychologically potent tools for survival in the absence of meaning. When everything around you collapses, when the world no longer gives you a reason to try, the soul begins to decay from the inside out. You don't need a noble reason to keep going. You just need a reason, even a fabricated one, because without purpose, the human mind drifts into despair. This is where survival psychology flips the script. You don't wait for meaning to arrive, you create it. You declare that your mission is to document each day, or protect a rock, or make it to a distant tree, or preserve your sanity for some unknown person in the future. You imagine you're a secret agent, a monk, a test subject in an experiment of endurance. You choose a goal, any goal, that gives weight to your suffering and direction to your steps. Purpose anchors pain. It reframes hardship as necessary. When you're freezing, starving, aching, or utterly alone, your brain needs a narrative stronger than the suffering itself. Even if it's absurd, invented, or symbolic, the mission gives you power. It transforms your fight from random to sacred. And strangely, the brain doesn't care if it's real. The moment you believe it matters, everything changes. You start showing up differently. You start strategizing instead of collapsing. Purpose injects willpower where fear has drained it. In survival, a fake mission can save your real life. It gives you a reason to act, to persist, and to hold on when everything else is screaming at you to let go. Use if-then scenarios to pre-plan crisis responses. Using if-then scenarios is a mental survival strategy that can turn helplessness into readiness, even when you're drowning in uncertainty. In extreme situations, the brain craves certainty, but when it can't find any, it spirals into paralysis or chaos. If-then thinking gives the mind what it needs, a path forward, even if it's hypothetical. It builds decision trees inside your nervous system before crisis hits, so that when the moment comes, you don't freeze, you act. The core of this technique is brutally simple. If X happens, then I will do Y. If I run out of food, then I'll ration by quarters. If I get injured, then I will stop, assess, stabilize. If I feel panic rising, then I'll drop to the ground and breathe in fours. These aren't just thoughts, they are commands waiting to be triggered. The moment reality matches your mental condition, the response locks in. No hesitation, no panic, just action. What makes if-then planning so powerful is that it converts fear into control. Instead of obsessing over what might go wrong, you get specific. You name the nightmare, you look it in the eye, and then you write the script. Even imagining your own death becomes less terrifying when you've walked through it with strategic poise. It doesn't make you morbid, it makes you ready. In survival, time collapses. There's no time to think, only to react. But those who plan their reactions in advance feel like they always knew what to do. That's the illusion of instinct. In truth, it's preparation wearing the mask of calm. Rotate mental focus zones, body scan, external, internal thoughts. Rotating mental focus zones is a survival technique that recalibrates your mind when stress becomes overwhelming, when panic takes over your body, or when time slows to a crawl and every second feels like a battle. In moments of isolation, danger, or sensory deprivation, your awareness can lock onto a single source of distress, physical pain, racing thoughts, or environmental threats, amplifying them until they dominate your entire reality. This technique is how you take your power back. The idea is simple but profound. Shift your attention between three distinct zones: your body, the external world, and your internal thoughts. Start with a body scan. Feel the weight of your limbs, the rhythm of your breath, the tension in your jaw. Describe it aloud or silently. This grounds you in the present. Then move to the external. What can you hear? What do you see, smell, or feel on your skin? Name 5 things. Let your senses draw you outward. Then shift to your mind. What are you thinking? What memories or fears are surfacing? Observe without reacting. This rotation breaks the feedback loop of fear. It diversifies your mental bandwidth. Instead of drowning in pain or obsessing over what might happen next, you become the observer. You regain the ability to choose your focus. And when you choose, you're no longer powerless. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about keeping your mind from turning against you. Rotating your focus zones gives you a mental rudder. It resets your nervous system, reclaims attention, and returns control when chaos tries to consume you. Sing nonsense songs to interrupt anxiety loops. Singing nonsense songs in a survival situation might seem foolish, even irrational, but it is one of the most unexpectedly effective psychological tools for snapping your brain out of an anxiety loop. When fear grips the mind, it doesn't just whisper, it repeats. Thoughts spiral in tight, suffocating circles. The same what-ifs, the same terrifying images, the same mental catastrophes playing on loop, louder with each rotation. You don't think your way out of that. You shock your way out. And that's where nonsense songs come in. Silly, absurd, juvenile, out of place. That's the point. Singing a bizarre, made-up song disrupts the pattern. It hijacks your brain's repetitive programming with something unexpected, rhythmic, and harmless. You confuse the fear. You cut the loop with absurdity. Imagine being on the edge of panic and suddenly singing, "Banana shoes are climbing trees with jelly bean hats." It sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous. But your brain has to stop and pay attention to it. This act forces your cognitive gears to shift. Language centers activate. Breath deepens. Your rhythm resets. It's not just distraction. It's neural interference. Even humming strange melodies or chanting gibberish syllables, la fra zumbala, starts to interrupt the physiological storm. Muscles relax. The body realizes it's not under immediate attack. It starts to believe you're okay, even if you're not yet. And in the bleakest moments, this kind of nonsense becomes rebellion. It's you saying, "You won't have me, fear. I'm still me." In the absurdity, there is power, because nothing unnerves panic like someone who sings to it instead of begging it to go away. Simulate a friend's presence when speaking or reflecting. Simulating a friend's presence is a hauntingly effective psychological survival trick, especially when solitude stretches into something darker than silence. Human beings are wired for connection. Our brains are social instruments, and without interaction, they begin to fray. The absence of another voice can make your own thoughts turn hostile, but by imagining someone beside you, someone kind, familiar, safe, you summon a form of emotional oxygen that keeps your spirit alive. You do this deliberately. You choose the friend, real or imagined, someone you trust, someone who would stay calm when you can't. You speak aloud to them as if they are there. This is what I did today. I'm scared. I don't know what comes next. What would you say? You might even pause to hear their answer. You're not pretending they're physically there. You're accessing the part of your mind that knows how to love and be loved. This imagined presence keeps your thoughts in check. You speak more kindly when you're speaking to a friend. You reflect more clearly. You explain instead of spiral. The voice of the other becomes a buffer against despair, guilt, or shame. It gives you a companion in your fight. There's power in this illusion. Your heart slows. Your anxiety dips. The brain responds to imagined connection almost the same way it does to real conversation. And in a place where no one can reach you, this simulated presence becomes sacred. It becomes the reason you don't give up, because you're not just surviving for yourself. You're still talking to someone who believes you can make it through. Count backwards by odd numbers to reassert cognitive control. Counting backwards by odd numbers is more than a mental exercise. It's a lifeline for reclaiming control in the midst of internal chaos. When anxiety crashes through your body like a tidal wave or dissociation begins to pull you away from the present moment, your brain needs something concrete, something structured, something it can do. This simple act, 5-3-1-1-3, is deceptively powerful. It gives your overwhelmed mind a narrow path to walk, and in walking it, the panic begins to fade. The beauty lies in its precision. It's just hard enough to demand focus, but not so hard that it feels impossible. Your brain can't spin in panic and calculate odd numbers backward at the same time. One process will win, and when you commit to counting, the fear starts to lose. It forces your mind to shift from emotion to cognition, from chaos to logic. You start to feel the edge of your brain coming back online. This technique is especially potent because it doesn't rely on external tools. You can do it while standing in a dark forest, locked in a bathroom, or buried under blankets unable to breathe. There is no prep, no timer, no audience, just numbers and breath. And the effect is real. Heart rate slows, breathing regulates, and the world stops spinning for just long enough for you to remember. You're not powerless. You're still in there. Counting backward by odd numbers is not just math. It's rebellion. It's you dragging your mind out of the fire, one number at a time. Give names to internal voices, fear, logic, optimism. Giving names to your internal voices is a psychological survival method that transforms inner chaos into a council of characters you can talk to, negotiate with, and even overrule. When your mind is pulled in a dozen directions, fear screaming, logic whispering, hope rising and falling like a broken tide, it's easy to feel lost inside your own head. But the moment you name these voices, you separate them from you. You stop being swallowed by emotion and start leading your inner world. Maybe you call your fear voice the worrier or shadow. Maybe logic becomes the engineer and optimism becomes the bright one. You can make them as silly or as serious as you like. Give them tones, personalities, faces if you want. What matters is this. When fear says, "We're going to fail," you don't absorb it blindly. You say, "That's just shadow talking again. He always panics before things start." When logic says, "We need a plan," you listen with respect. When optimism says, "But we've come this far," you let that voice speak louder. This technique gives you distance. You are not your panic, not your despair, not even your hope. You are the one hearing them all. In the loneliness of survival, this inner counsel becomes your team. You learn when to listen and when to override. You learn how to lead. And sometimes, when fear is loudest and everything feels like it's closing in, You can smile just a little because you know who is speaking, and that means you're still in control. You're not alone in your mind. You're in command. Assign colors to emotions to identify and manage them. Assigning colors to emotions is a psychological survival technique that taps into something ancient and primal inside the human mind, the need to see what we feel in order to understand it. When fear, rage, grief, or numbness take over, emotions can feel like fog, dense, shapeless, and impossible to hold. But when you give them a color, you give them form. You give them edges. You name them in a way your brain can visualize, organize, and most importantly, survive. You might decide that anger is a deep, violent red, that hopelessness is a smoky gray, that calm is ocean blue, and anxiety a sharp yellow that flickers like electricity. It doesn't have to be logical. It has to be yours. When your emotions start to spiral or blend into each other, you pause and ask, what color is this right now? That one question forces awareness. Suddenly, you're not drowning in emotion. You're observing it. You've created a layer of separation. The feeling doesn't own you anymore. You're looking at it, not from inside it. This color coding becomes your emotional map. You can track shifts throughout the day. You can recognize patterns, like noticing that sadness always arrives in waves of dull green before turning black. You can even tell yourself what you need. I need more blue today. It becomes a language between your conscious mind and your emotional self. And when you're in survival mode, unable to think clearly or speak your pain, color becomes your code. It's how you stay connected to yourself. It's how you stop becoming numb. Because the moment you can name what you feel, even in color, is the moment you begin to master it. Create false deadlines to maintain urgency. Creating false deadlines is a psychological survival technique that injects adrenaline into stagnation, urgency into aimlessness, and structure into chaos. When you're stuck in a situation where real pressure is absent, days bleeding into each other, tasks without timelines, isolation draining your will, the absence of real consequences slowly paralyzes motivation. The mind begins to idle, drifting from distraction to dread. But with a false deadline, you wake it back up. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about strategically activating your survival drive. You set a clear, invented cutoff. I must finish building the shelter by sundown, even if there's no storm coming. I must have my firewood sorted before this next hour passes, even if there's more time. The brain doesn't distinguish strongly between real urgency and believable urgency. When you give it a finish line, it starts running. These invented deadlines generate a sense of forward motion. They break tasks into sprints. They force decisions instead of hesitation. More than that, they protect you from the slow psychological rot that sets in when there's nothing pushing you. Boredom turns into depression. Waiting turns into giving up. But when time feels short, because you made it so, your heartbeat quickens, your focus sharpens, and your actions become purposeful. Every time you hit a false deadline, even if it didn't matter, it matters because you did something. You didn't stall, you didn't spiral, you moved. In survival, that's everything. When real danger doesn't pressure you, pretend it does. Urgency is fuel, and you can make your own. Practice sensory zooming. Focus deeply on one sense. Practicing sensory zooming is a survival technique that can pull you back from the edge of panic, despair, or disconnection by anchoring your mind in the immediate, the tangible, the real. In high stress or isolating situations, your thoughts scatter like startled birds. Your awareness becomes wide, chaotic, fragmented. But when you deliberately choose to focus intensely on just one sense, you gather yourself again. You become present. You return to your body. You can choose any sense, sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, but you don't use it passively. You zoom in. You examine the texture of bark with your eyes like it's the only thing that exists. You close your eyes and listen to the farthest sound you can hear, the wind shifting, a branch creaking, your own breath trembling. You feel the fabric of your sleeve, the dirt under your fingernail, the weight of your heartbeat. You become that one sense, flooding your awareness with its input and letting everything else fall away. The effect is profound. It slows racing thoughts. It breaks anxiety loops. It snaps you out of dissociation. Your brain, which may be screaming warnings or replaying trauma, becomes occupied with now. Sensory zooming is not about distraction. It's about control. It says, I am here, I am alive, this is what's real. In survival, you don't always have answers. You don't always have hope, but you always have your senses. Zooming into one gives your mind something solid to hold when everything else is falling. It is a form of meditation under fire, a grounding wire in the storm, a way to feel again when feeling seems unbearable. Invent fake radio broadcasts to simulate social connection. Inventing fake radio broadcasts is a strange, beautiful, and incredibly effective psychological survival trick, especially when isolation becomes a gnawing force that eats away at your sense of reality. In silence, the human mind begins to fracture. We crave voices, rhythms, the sense that someone, somewhere is out there. Without that, your internal dialogue turns toxic, circular, unstable. But when you start broadcasting, even if it's all in your head, something shifts. You go from being a prisoner of silence to a participant in a story. You become the host of your own mental radio station. You speak aloud to an invisible audience. This is Captain Rowe reporting from Sector 17, Day 43, temperatures dropping, spirits still intact. Or maybe you play the news anchor, the music DJ, the midnight philosopher reading poetry to a lone listener on the other side of the world. You give weather reports, you invent headlines, you reflect on your day, you tell jokes, you say the things you wish someone else would say to you. This technique satisfies the psychological hunger for social rhythm. The act of speaking outward, framing your experience for a listener, even a fictional one, anchors you in reality. It gives structure to your thoughts. It relieves emotional pressure. You stop being just a person surviving in silence. You become a voice. You regain your identity. And something profound happens when you do it long enough. You start to feel heard, not just by yourself, but by something bigger. The loneliness shrinks. The madness slows. And your voice, your made-up, hopeful broadcast into the void, becomes the proof that you are still human, still fighting, still there. Pretend you're being watched by someone you admire. Pretending you're being watched by someone you admire is a deeply motivating psychological survival tactic that taps into our need to be witnessed, especially when no one is around to see our effort, our struggle, or our pain. In isolation, the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence. You push through hunger, cold, fear, and despair with no applause, no encouragement, no recognition. It can make everything feel pointless. But when you imagine that someone you respect, someone whose opinion of you matters, is watching, everything changes. That imagined presence becomes a mirror, a motivator, and a compass. You hear their voice in your head. Don't give up now. You imagine their eyes on you as you endure the impossible. And somehow, you lift your head, you push a little harder, you steady your breath and make the next move, not because you're unafraid, but because you want to be someone they would be proud of. This technique transforms invisible suffering into a kind of performance, not for vanity, but for meaning. It reframes your pain as part of a story. You are no longer just surviving. You're showing them what you're made of, whether it's a parent who believed in you, a hero who inspired you, or a future version of yourself watching from the other side of this trial. Their presence, even imagined, makes you accountable to something greater than fear. When you feel like crumbling, this presence reminds you someone you admire sees this, and that thought alone can steady shaking hands, quiet the quitting voice, and reignite your will to endure. Use mantras of defiance, I am still here, etc. Using mantras of defiance is a raw, visceral act of psychological warfare, waged not against the outside world, but against the part of your mind that whispers, "Give up." In survival, you will meet moments where logic fails, hope is irrelevant, and nothing makes sense. Pain screams louder than reason. Loneliness becomes a physical ache, and that's where these mantras come in. Short, brutal, unyielding. They are not gentle affirmations, they are battle cries. A mantra of defiance is not meant to make you feel better. It is meant to make you stand back up. I am still here. You will not break me. This is not the end. These are not just words. They are declarations that your spirit will not be erased, even if your body is shaking and your mind is unraveling. You say it through clenched teeth. You say it when you don't believe it yet. You say it when the silence is heavy and your heart is hollow, because saying it out loud forces your brain to listen. It brings rhythm to chaos. It snaps you back into a version of yourself that fights, and the repetition rewires your instincts. With each mantra, you embed a new survival reflex, defiance over despair. Over time, the mantra becomes armor. The moment fear floods in, it's there. I am still here. You say it again. I am still here. You grit through the shaking. I am still here. And the fear, while it might still scream, no longer decides who you are. You do. Sketch maps of your mental state. Sketching maps of your mental state is a raw, creative survival tool that turns inner chaos into something visible, something you can navigate. In high stress or prolonged hardship, the mind becomes a maze. Thoughts race in loops, emotions pile up like storm clouds, and fear becomes so thick you can't tell what direction you're facing. You don't know if you're getting better, breaking down, or simply standing still. But when you draw it, when you map it, you give your pain a shape, and that shape gives you direction. You start simple. Maybe your mind feels like a cliffside, crumbling at the edge, solid in the middle, or a storm-tossed sea with flashes of clarity. Maybe it's a dark forest, and today you're deeper in. You don't have to be an artist, you just have to be honest. Draw arrows, danger zones, safe havens, traps and signals. Label a cave, where I go when I'm afraid. Mark a corner, memories I avoid. Sketch out landmarks like hope, anger, or calm. By doing this, you begin to track your psychological terrain. You can see where you've been and where you might go next. Over time, you can sketch new versions and compare. Maybe yesterday was a battlefield, but today is a riverbank. Maybe you're stuck in a loop, circling the same mental trap. Now you know where you are. This act of mapping transforms the invisible into the knowable. It breaks the illusion that you're lost in some formless darkness. No, you are in a place, and places can be traveled through. Places can be exited. Even if you're drawing your prison, you are also drawing the way out. Use a mirror mind. Observe thoughts as a separate self. Using a mirror mind is one of the most powerful psychological survival tactics for escaping the suffocating grip of fear, panic, and hopelessness. In moments of isolation or crisis, your thoughts can turn into tyrants. They rise like a storm. I'm not going to make it. This is too much. I'm losing control. And when you believe every word they scream, they drag you under. But when you activate the mirror mind, you stop being the thoughts. You become the one watching them. This isn't denial, it's distance. The mirror mind is the inner observer, calm, curious, unshaken. When terror pulses through you, the mirror mind notices there is fear here. When your thoughts spiral, it simply says, thinking is happening, no judgment, no merging. You look at your inner world as though it belongs to someone else, a subject, not a master. And that shift changes everything. When you step into the mirror mind, you reclaim authority. You are not the fear, you are the one seeing fear. You are not the despair, you are the one naming despair. It is the act of separating who you are from what you feel. This turns your emotions into data, not destiny. You start to respond instead of react. In survival, The mirror mind is the difference between drowning in thought and navigating through it. It doesn't silence the chaos. It gives you a quiet place to stand inside it. It lets you see the storm without becoming it. And from that place, even when everything inside you is screaming, you find the clarity to whisper, "I see you, but I choose what comes next." Rewrite past failures into survival lessons. Rewriting past failures into survival lessons is a deeply personal and emotionally transformative practice that shifts the narrative of your pain from shame to strength. In moments of crisis, the mind often dredges up every mistake you've ever made, every wrong turn, every betrayal, every collapse. It uses them as weapons. See, you've always been weak. You always screw it up. And in that instant, you don't just feel fear, you feel unworthy of surviving. But this is the moment where you take your story back. You stop seeing those failures as proof that you're doomed and start seeing them as training. Every breakdown taught you something about how far you can fall and still get up. Every time you trusted the wrong person, you learned the shape of betrayal. Every time you gave up too early, you learned the cost of surrender. These aren't just memories, they are field notes from your own life, written in blood and regret, and now reclaimed. This process doesn't erase the pain, it reassigns it. You revisit the moment you froze, the time you ran, the time you said nothing when you should have fought, and you say, "That was my lesson in fear. That was my chapter on endurance. That was where I learned what kind of person I never want to be again." And suddenly, you are not a person who failed. You are a person who learned. You are not dragging a past behind you. You are carrying a manual. Your pain becomes preparation. Your story becomes a survival map, with every scar pointing forward. Visualize your story being told later as a hero's journey. Visualizing your story as a hero's journey isn't fantasy. It's psychological survival through narrative alchemy. When you're in the depths of suffering, when the dirt is under your nails and the silence is thick enough to drown in, your mind wants to collapse inward. It whispers, "This is meaningless. No one will ever know. No one will care." And that's when you ignite this trick. You choose to believe that everything you're enduring now is part of a legend in the making. You imagine that one day, maybe months, maybe years from now, someone will sit down and tell your story. They'll describe the day you almost broke and how you didn't, the long night when no one came, but you stood up anyway. They'll say there was a turning point and they chose to rise. You begin to narrate your current pain as a future triumph, not with delusion, but with direction. You're not escaping reality, you're giving it structure. This shifts the meaning of your suffering. It becomes a crucible, not a curse. The exhaustion turns into a trial by fire. The isolation becomes the desert the hero had to cross. Every moment of fear becomes something you'll recount as part of the moment you found your strength. It's no longer just survival. It's becoming. You are not lost. You are in the middle chapters, the ones no one sees while they're happening, but that define everything. And when you start thinking like that, something inside you begins to glow again. Because this is no longer just about getting through the day. This is about what you will one day say you survived. Delay despair with a worry hour. Schedule when you'll panic. Delaying despair with a worry hour is a cunning psychological tactic that doesn't fight fear head on. It contains it. In survival situations, despair doesn't always come as a tidal wave. Sometimes it drips, a quiet dread in your chest, a whisper that says, "This is never going to end." And once it starts, it spreads through your muscles, your breath, your will. But what if, instead of drowning in it, you told it, "Not yet. You have your time, but not now." That's the power of the worry hour. You assign despair its place. You say, at 8 p.m. for 15 minutes, I will sit and worry. I'll let the fear in, and I'll listen to everything it has to say. But until then, I have other things to do. And you commit to that rule. Every time the panic tries to claw in early,
You respond, "Not yet." You get your turn later. You are not denying emotion. You are disciplining it. This gives you something rare in crisis: control. The fear doesn't own your day anymore. You've put it in a box. It's still there, but it's waiting for your permission. And when the time comes, sometimes you let it out. You cry, you scream, you collapse. But other times, you get to 8 p.m. and realize you've made it through, that you don't need to fall apart tonight, that you've earned one more moment of peace. This isn't suppression, it's strategy. It's you saying, "You may be strong, fear, but I am the one who chooses when we speak." And in survival, even that small act of choice can feel like winning. Laugh deliberately. Forced laughter stimulates mood. Laughing deliberately, yes, even when it feels fake, hollow, or absurd, is a psychological survival tactic that can jolt your nervous system out of despair. It sounds ridiculous at first. Why would you laugh in the middle of fear, hunger, or exhaustion? But the science is unshakable. The body doesn't fully distinguish between real and forced laughter. The act itself, shaking your shoulders, releasing air, forcing that strange sound from your chest, triggers the same hormonal cascade. It releases dopamine, it lowers cortisol, it slows your heart, it tells your brain you are not dying. This trick becomes powerful when everything else stops working, when your mind is too clouded to meditate, when your body is too wrecked to move, when your thoughts are too heavy to fight. You take control with something primal and strange. You laugh, not because anything is funny, but because you refuse to let darkness take everything. You force out that short, jagged sound, 1 second, then 2, then maybe a string of fake chuckles, and, as insane as it feels, something shifts. In the bleakest conditions, deliberate laughter becomes rebellion. It's defiance with breath. It's a small, ridiculous act of choosing life when everything around you says otherwise. You're telling the pain, "You don't own me." You're showing your brain that there is still room for absurdity, still space for movement, still you in there somewhere. It's not about humor. It's about oxygen, chemicals, rhythm, refusal, and sometimes, after enough fake laughter, the real kind starts to follow. And that's survival's sweetest surprise. Construct fictional daily news reports about your survival. Constructing fictional daily news reports about your survival is a powerful psychological strategy that transforms your suffering into significance. In isolation, trauma, or prolonged hardship, one of the cruelest torments is the silence, the total absence of witnesses. No one sees your pain, no one sees the victories, and in that silence, your story begins to feel invisible, even to you. But when you imagine that your survival is being covered on the evening news, everything changes. You become the subject of a narrative, a headline, a reason. You picture it, day 23, still standing, survivor pushes through another brutal night. You imagine a voiceover, crisp and authoritative, describing how you rationed your last meal, built shelter from debris, or fought through a panic attack and won. Maybe the report includes interviews with imaginary experts. We're seeing extraordinary resilience here. She shouldn't still be standing, but she is. You hear applause, admiration, awe. You are no longer a ghost in your own life. You are seen. This fantasy isn't delusion. It's medicine. The brain craves story. It needs arcs, purpose, heroes. When you give yourself that structure, you validate your effort. You remind yourself that this matters, that someone, somewhere, real or not, is keeping track, that your fight is being recorded. Even writing or speaking these reports aloud reinforces agency. It turns your actions into events, your endurance into newsworthy triumph, and in doing so, it pulls you out of the numb void of survival and back into meaning. Because when you start telling your story like it matters, some deep part of you starts to believe it. And then you keep going. Use spatial memory tricks to maintain mental sharpness.
Using spatial memory tricks is a psychological survival technique that keeps your cognitive edge intact when everything around you starts to blur. In isolation or extreme stress, the brain begins to atrophy, not just emotionally, but intellectually. Days feel the same, spaces lose detail, memory weakens, you forget why you stood up or what you were about to do. The mind begins to dim, but the moment you engage your spatial memory, you spark something ancient and vital, the brain's built-in map maker. This technique taps into the hippocampus, the region of your brain responsible for memory and navigation. It's one of the last parts of the mind to erode under stress, and it thrives on spatial thinking. You use it by visualizing or navigating real and imagined spaces. You trace the layout of your childhood home. You walk through the streets of your old neighborhood in your mind. You mentally place survival tasks in different rooms you construct, one for firewood, one for water, one for your reflections. You assign memories to corners, emotions to doorways. By doing this, you force your brain to work, to stay vivid. You protect yourself from the dulling fog that makes people lose track of time, place, and self. Spatial memory brings order to mental chaos. It challenges your focus, revives detail, and strengthens recall. Even without movement, you create movement inside. In survival, sharpness is not a luxury, it's armor. The clearer your internal world, the better you navigate the external one. These mental rooms, paths, and landmarks become your sanctuary. They remind you that your mind, no matter how confined your body becomes, still has places to go. Create anchor phrases, simple sayings that reset you. Creating anchor phrases is a survival tactic that acts like a verbal handhold when your mind is slipping down a cliff of fear, exhaustion, or chaos. In the storm of survival, when your body is shaking, your thoughts are racing, and despair is tightening its grip, you don't always have the strength for long reasoning or deep breathing. Sometimes, all you need is a few words, words that hit like lightning, words that pull you back. An anchor phrase is short, sharp, repetitive. It doesn't try to explain, it commands. It speaks directly to the animal inside you that wants to flee, collapse, or quit. You choose your own, something that roots you when the panic starts rising. This is not the end, just the next step. Still breathing, still fighting. We don't stop here. These aren't just words, they're rituals. Each repetition drives them deeper, like pounding a stake into the ground during a storm. Your anchor phrase becomes your internal signal. You whisper it when your hands start to shake. You repeat it when the silence gets too loud. You scream it into your mind when you feel yourself disappearing. It interrupts the mental noise and gives your thoughts a place to land. Over time, your brain starts to respond to it automatically. The phrase becomes associated with steadiness, with return, with strength. In a world out of control, this tiny string of words becomes your handle, your chain, your rope. You don't need a solution in that moment. You need a reset. And that's what your anchor phrase gives you. A voice that says, not yet, not now, you're still here. Mentally pack and unpack a survival bag. Mentally packing and unpacking a survival bag is a deceptively simple psychological exercise, but in high-stress, isolating, or stagnant environments, it becomes a tool of clarity, control, and grounding. When fear spirals or the world feels like it's slipping out of your hands, this visualization brings you back. It gives your mind something concrete, purposeful, and utterly human to hold on to. You start by imagining your bag. Picture the texture, the weight, the color. Then slowly, item by item, you begin to fill it. What do you need? A knife, a lighter, a tarp, rope, water, a photo, a journal, a small token of someone you love. You feel each object as you add it. You decide what stays and what gets left behind. You become deliberate, focused. This act serves three functions. First, it sharpens attention. It shifts your brain out of panic mode and into active problem solving. Second, It reconnects you to a sense of preparedness. Even if you're physically unprepared, your mind starts building the tools. Third, it restores a feeling of agency. When everything around you feels uncontrollable, this bag becomes your world, and you are the architect. When you're done packing, unpack it slowly. Revisit each item. Ask why it matters. Reorganize. Reprioritize. Each time you do this exercise, your focus tightens, your memory strengthens, and your emotional chaos finds a shape. This imagined survival bag becomes a metaphor for your mind, what you choose to carry, what you let go, what you always keep close. And in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of fear, that mental ritual becomes a thread, something small, but strong enough to hold you together. Give yourself ranks or titles, e.g., Commander of Survival. Giving yourself ranks or titles is more than just playful imagination. It's a deep psychological strategy for reclaiming identity and authority when survival begins to strip everything else away. In extreme isolation or crisis, the sense of who you are begins to dissolve. You're no longer a friend, a parent, an employee. You become someone crawling through minutes, trying to hold on. But when you assign yourself a title, Commander of Survival, Keeper of the Fire, Guardian of the Last Camp, you're not escaping reality. You're rewriting your role within it. This isn't about fantasy. It's about ownership. A title reframes your actions. You're not just scavenging for water. You're fulfilling a mission as the quartermaster of vital supplies. You're not simply enduring another silent evening. You're standing night watch as the sentinel of sanity. The act of naming yourself shifts the narrative from victim to leader, from passive to active, from barely surviving to strategically enduring. Titles create structure in chaos. They offer dignity in darkness. And most of all, they summon pride, not arrogance, but the kind of inner pride that says, I have a role here. I matter. I choose who I am, no matter what this world throws at me. When despair threatens to flatten you, a title lifts your spine. When the hours feel pointless, a rank gives them purpose. You salute yourself. You log your duties. You speak as a leader. And slowly, you start to believe it. Because survival isn't just physical, it's psychological theater. And sometimes, the only way to stay human is to name yourself something heroic and then rise to meet it. Use alter egos for tasks you fear, e.g., let tough you handle pain. Using alter egos in moments of fear, pain, or doubt is one of the most potent psychological survival strategies available, especially when your real self feels too broken, too exhausted, or too afraid to continue. The idea isn't fantasy, it's transformation. You build a version of yourself, a persona who can handle what you feel you can't. And when you summon them, you borrow their strength. You step aside, they step in. Maybe it's tough you, maybe it's the machine, the soldier, or the ghost. It's whoever you need to be to do the thing that feels impossible. You create a name, a personality, even a tone of voice. You don't say, I'm scared to keep walking on this leg. You say, this is where tough me takes over. That's the part of you who doesn't flinch, who's not tired, who's seen worse. This mental trick separates your fear from your function. It bypasses the part of your identity that's screaming and lets another part, one designed to survive, take the wheel. It's not dissociation, it's tactical reinvention. Your mind becomes a team, and you assign tasks to its strongest players. Athletes use this. Soldiers use this. People enduring unthinkable pain use this. Because it works. Because sometimes the part of you that cries can't also be the part that moves. But when you step into an alter ego, your back straightens. Your breathing changes. You do the thing you didn't think you could. And when it's done, when you've survived another hour, another task, another hell, you can collapse back into yourself. You'll thank that version of you, the one who didn't quit, the one who came when called. Record mental audio logs of your day as if for future survivors. Recording mental audio logs is a powerful psychological survival strategy that pulls you out of isolation by creating the illusion of audience, legacy, and purpose, even if you're completely alone. When the hours stretch silent and the weight of solitude presses in, your inner world begins to collapse. Thoughts repeat, time erodes. You start to forget who you are, but the moment you imagine that someone, anyone, will one day hear your story, everything sharpens. You start to narrate your life, and your life begins to matter again. You speak aloud, or whisper, or imagine the words clearly in your mind. Audio log, day 19. No contact. Cold has set in. Rationed the last of the dry food. Mental state, stable but slipping. Today, I remembered the smell of rain on pavement. You aren't just surviving anymore. You're documenting, you're testifying. You become both the survivor and the storyteller, and that dual role transforms how you process fear, pain, and even hope. This ritual turns the chaotic into the cinematic. It invites reflection. It forces structure. What happened today? What did you feel, notice, endure? What did you learn? What would future survivors need to hear to carry on? You begin to narrate even the smallest details, and in doing so, you reclaim a sense of meaning. You are no longer just lost in the dark. You are reporting from it, and someone, someday, may find your words and know that you were here, that you fought, that you mattered. Even if no one ever hears it, the act of speaking it gives your mind a mirror and your soul a witness. Simulate being interviewed about your endurance. Simulating being interviewed about your endurance is a deeply motivating psychological survival tactic, one that turns your suffering into a future story worth telling. In moments of hardship, when you're exhausted, afraid, or drowning in silence, the mind naturally asks, "What's the point? Who will ever know what I've gone through?" That question can become a hole you fall into, or it can become the spark for something powerful. You imagine the answer. You imagine the interview. You picture yourself months or years from now, sitting across from someone who truly wants to understand. A journalist, a therapist, a documentarian, a child who idolizes your strength. They ask, "How did you keep going when everything seemed impossible?" And you begin to answer, out loud. If you can, you tell the story, not just of what happened, but of how you endured. You describe the night you nearly broke, the moment you thought about quitting, the thing that brought you back from the edge. This simulation does something vital. It reframes your present struggle as the pivotal scene in a heroic narrative. It makes your suffering matter. It gives it context, purpose. The pain is no longer just pain. It's the proof of your perseverance. And as you tell the story, you begin to write it in real time. Your decisions start to change. You want to be proud of your answers. You want to make your future self worthy of that imagined spotlight. And somehow, in that quiet moment, when there's no camera, no interviewer, just you and your breath, you start to believe that one day this will all be part of something. That survival is not the end of your story. It's the chapter someone else will one day need to hear. Design imaginary rewards for surviving each day. Designing imaginary rewards for surviving each day is a deeply human and quietly brilliant psychological tactic, especially when you're operating in a world where real rewards no longer exist. When you're stripped of comfort, routine, and recognition, your brain begins to starve, not just for food or rest, but for meaningful feedback. The grind of mere existence starts to feel like failure. But when you invent rewards, intimate, creative, powerful, you begin to feed your spirit again. You begin to matter to yourself. At the end of each day, you close your eyes and present yourself with something earned, a glowing medal placed on your chest by a grateful future, a whispered thank you from a version of yourself 5 years from now, a crown made of thorns and iron, gifted by the gods of grit, a warm bath in your mind, a hall of heroes where your name is added in quiet ceremony. Whatever shape it takes, the reward becomes your acknowledgement, a symbol that says you did it again. It sounds like fantasy. It is, but it works, because your brain is hardwired to chase reward, and in the absence of real applause, imagined praise still triggers a sense of completion. The body may be worn, the mind bruised, but with a ritual reward, the day ends with dignity, not emptiness. And when you wake up tomorrow, battered but breathing, the promise of another reward, another moment of inner recognition, will give you just enough momentum to move forward, because you're not just surviving blindly, you're surviving for something. Even if it's made of stardust and shadows, it's yours. And in darkness, that's enough. Debate your own negative thoughts like a courtroom battle. Debating your own negative thoughts like a courtroom battle is a fierce psychological survival technique, a mental war room where you stop accepting every cruel idea your mind throws at you as truth. In crisis, those dark voices grow louder. You're weak, you're failing, you'll never get out. Left unchallenged, they become laws. But when you summon this technique, you turn your mind into a courtroom, and you refuse to let hopelessness testify uncontested. You play both roles, the accuser and the defense. The accuser steps forward with the harshest version of your thoughts. You're worthless. You've messed everything up. No one would care if you vanished. You let that voice speak, but then you fight back. You become your own defense attorney, sharp and unflinching. That's speculation. Where's the evidence? Look at what I survived yesterday. Look at what I'm doing right now. This isn't weakness. It's resilience under fire. You challenge exaggeration with facts. You demand proof. You bring in witnesses. The time you didn't quit, the scar that healed, the thing you feared and still faced. You turn raw emotion into structured argument. You object. You counter. You expose the fear tactics of your own subconscious and strip them down until they shrink. This isn't just talk. It's power. Because every time you do this, you train your brain to separate feeling from fact. You stop letting shame and fear sit in the judge's chair. You take the gavel. You declare, that thought is not the truth. That fear is not final. In the courtroom of your mind, survival depends on this. Your voice must speak louder than your demons. Consciously limit vocabulary to challenge your focus. Consciously limiting your vocabulary is a strange, yet startlingly effective psychological survival technique, a form of mental discipline that forces your brain to stay alert, flexible, and engaged, even when monotony threatens to shut it down. In extreme situations, prolonged isolation, sensory deprivation, endless repetition, the mind begins to dull. Thoughts get lazy. Words lose precision. Your inner world starts sounding like static. But when you impose artificial constraints on your language, you spark a silent revolution inside your head. Choose 5 words you won't use for the rest of the day. Replace them with alternatives, or challenge yourself to explain every observation using only single-syllable words. Maybe you narrate your actions in metaphors. Maybe you force yourself to describe emotions without ever naming them directly. This is not about sounding clever. It's about staying sharp. It's about turning your thoughts into puzzles, not broken records. The effect is immediate. You start listening to yourself. You pause before speaking. You shape your thoughts more deliberately. Even in silence, the act of thinking becomes a craft again. You stop drifting. You return to the present. Limiting vocabulary doesn't restrict your mind. It refines it. It's resistance training for attention. In survival, the greatest danger is not just hunger or cold. It's mental erosion, the slow fading of focus, creativity, self-awareness. But with this trick, you give your brain something to do, something to fight with, something to play with. And through that play, you reclaim control. You build sharpness where dullness tried to settle. And you remind yourself that even in the quietest, most broken places, you are still thinking, still creating. still alive. Envision yourself as the protector of someone weaker. Envisioning yourself as the protector of someone weaker is a deeply emotional and instinct-triggering survival strategy, one that taps into something primal, selfless, and indestructible when your own strength is fading, when survival becomes a solitary war, when it's just you against pain, hunger, fear, or despair. It's easy to think, why keep fighting? But when you picture someone smaller, more fragile, more helpless than you, someone who needs you to hold the line, something inside you reignites. This person doesn't have to be real. It might be a child you imagine sheltering from the cold, a scared animal, a younger version of yourself, a symbolic soul, weak, vulnerable, terrified, walking beside you in your mind. And you are the guardian, the shield, the fire that keeps burning so they don't freeze. You begin thinking differently. You stop surrendering to pain because they are watching you. You eat the last ration not for your own hunger, but because they need you steady. You whisper comfort aloud, not because you need to hear it, but because they do. And in doing so, it soothes you too. You walk when you want to collapse because they need to be carried. This trick bypasses ego. It activates your protector instinct. And when your own life feels too heavy to hold, holding it for someone else can make it suddenly bearable. Even imaginary dependence gives your strength a target, a reason, a shape. You're no longer surviving as a lone body. You're enduring as a guardian. And protectors don't quit. They can't, because something innocent depends on their fire staying lit. Practice inner applause after each success. Practicing inner applause after each success, no matter how small, is a powerful psychological survival method that restores your sense of worth when the world offers you nothing in return. In the chaos of crisis or the numbness of isolation, victories often go unnoticed. There's no one to say good job, no hand on your back, no standing ovation, and without acknowledgement, even the hardest earned progress can feel invisible. That emptiness is dangerous. It makes your efforts feel meaningless. That's why you must learn to clap for yourself. This isn't indulgence, it's necessity. When you complete a task, start a fire, stop a panic, walk just a few more steps, you pause, you breathe, and you tell yourself, that was good. Maybe you nod, maybe you whisper it aloud. You did that. You imagine the crowd. You imagine someone who loves you watching with pride. You imagine a room of people rising to their feet, not because you were perfect, but because you refused to quit. That moment of inner celebration isn't just symbolic. It sends a neurological signal. This action mattered. The dopamine hits. Your brain starts linking effort with reward again. You reinforce momentum. You give yourself what survival so often lacks: recognition. Over time, this ritual changes you. You stop waiting for permission to feel proud. You stop needing applause from outside. Your inner voice becomes your coach, your cheerleader, your witness, because in survival, there might be no one else to see your strength. So you become the one who sees it. And when you do, something sacred happens. Your resilience starts to believe in itself. Turn pain into a signal, not a threat. Message, not alarm. Turning pain into a signal, not a threat, is one of the most transformative psychological survival tools you can master, because in extreme conditions, pain becomes a constant companion. Whether it's the burn in your muscles, the ache in your bones, the tightness in your chest, or the silent scream of loneliness, pain shows up uninvited and all-consuming. And unless you change the way you interpret it, it will start to control you. But pain doesn't have to mean panic. It can mean information. You shift the meaning. You stop treating pain like a red siren, screaming danger, failure, collapse, and start treating it like a quiet knock on the door. Hey, something's happening. Listen. You train yourself to observe it without fear. Is this sharp or dull, local or spreading? Does it mean stop or adjust? The moment you start interpreting pain as a message, not an emergency, You begin to respond instead of react. This mindset gives you space. It slows the spiral. It allows you to think inside the discomfort instead of being consumed by it. You ask, what is this pain asking of me? And the answers start to come. Shift weight, slow down, take a breath, rehydrate, breathe through it. It becomes a conversation instead of a war. In survival, fear of pain is often worse than the pain itself, but when you stop giving it the power to terrify you, it loses its grip. It becomes just another voice in the storm, one you listen to, not obey. Pain may still be there, but now it serves you. Now you lead. Hold strategy meetings with yourself each morning. Holding a strategy meeting with yourself each morning is a deceptively simple but deeply grounding survival tactic, one that turns every day into a mission, every step into a decision, and every thought into a tool. In survival, time becomes a blur. Days fold into nights. Chaos steals structure. Your sense of control slips through your fingers. But when you begin each day by calling a meeting with yourself, calm, clear, deliberate, you take that power back. You wake up and sit still, even for 60 seconds. You speak silently or aloud. Okay, what's the mission today? What are the threats? What are the resources? What do I need to do to keep going? You ask yourself as if you're the leader, the commander, the CEO of your own survival. You take stock. How am I feeling? Mentally, physically, emotionally? What can I control today? What's the single most important task? What's noise and what's vital? This meeting sets intention. It quiets panic. It creates forward motion from stillness. Even if the world outside is a mess, even if your body aches or your mind feels thin, you've begun with purpose, and that changes everything. When no one else is there to lead you, you become your own guide. This meeting is your compass. It is proof that you are not drifting, you are navigating. And when you face the next hour of uncertainty, hunger, or pain, you return to that moment and remember, I have a strategy. I'm not just surviving, I'm leading myself out. Imagine past ancestors watching you with pride. Imagining past ancestors watching you with pride is a psychological survival technique rooted in something deeper than motivation. It taps into blood, lineage, and the invisible weight of those who came before you. When you are cold, broken, or close to surrendering, this trick doesn't just push you forward, it grounds you in legacy. It says, you are not alone. You are the continuation of countless lives that refuse to give up. Close your eyes. Picture them, not as ghosts, but as real people, the ones who clawed through hunger, through war, through exile, the ones who buried children, crossed oceans, stood in fields with cracked hands, endured loss, oppression, grief, and still move forward. Now imagine them standing silently, watching you, not judging, not instructing, just witnessing. When your knees shake, when fear wraps around your ribs like ice, when your voice trembles inside your own mind, picture one of them nodding slowly. You may not know their names, you may never have seen their faces, but they know you, and they see the fire you're holding now as the same one they once passed down. This mental image changes your posture. It makes every act of survival, no matter how small, feel sacred. Drinking water becomes ceremony. Standing up becomes inheritance. Enduring becomes honor. It's not just your life on the line, it's your bloodline refusing to be erased. And in the darkest hour, when you feel like nothing you do matters, their silent presence reminds you, you were made from survivors. You carry their strength, and they are watching, not to see if you fail, but to see how far you'll go with what they gave you. Assign yourself a survival mission statement. Assigning yourself a survival mission statement is one of the most soul-centering psychological tactics you can deploy when life has stripped you down to your barest core. When you're in crisis, truly in it, the world shrinks. You forget who you were before the hunger, before the cold, before the silence. Your past feels distant. The future becomes a void, but a mission statement cuts through that fog like a blade. It gives you a reason, your reason, to keep going, no matter what. You craft it simply, like a vow. I survive so I can return with stories. I will not break, even if I bend. My mission is to endure with integrity. It doesn't have to be poetic. It just has to be true, something that speaks to the deepest part of you, the part still alive under the exhaustion and the fear. You repeat it when you wake up. You whisper it before sleep. You say it through gritted teeth when your body aches and your mind wants to give up. This statement becomes your North Star. When panic sets in, when meaning evaporates, when pain tries to convince you there's no point, you return to it. You remember that you're not just breathing, you're choosing. Every action, every step, every refusal to quit becomes part of your mission. And when you recite it, it changes your posture. It straightens your spine. It sharpens your eyes. Because now you're not just surviving out of instinct. You're surviving on purpose. And purpose, even when whispered in the dark, is louder than fear. Translate discomfort into scientific observation. Observe, don't react. Translating discomfort into scientific observation is a psychological survival method that turns suffering into study, a way to take back power from pain by transforming it into data. When discomfort hits, physical, emotional, or existential, your primal instinct is to react, flinch, fight, flee, freeze. But reaction feeds chaos. Observation rewires it. The moment you become the scientist in your own mind, everything changes. You stop being the subject. You become the observer. You don't say, "This is unbearable." You say, "Interesting." The pulse is faster. Shoulders are tense. Chest is tight. What triggered this? What's the duration? What's the intensity? On a scale of 1 to 10. You strip it of drama. You give it labels. You examine it like a phenomenon unfolding in a lab. That headache isn't agony. It's a pressure wave. That fear spike isn't failure. It's a cortisol surge. The cold in your bones isn't a punishment. It's thermoregulation under stress. This isn't detachment. It's strategic distancing. You are not dismissing the discomfort. You are dissecting it. You replace helplessness with curiosity. You ask, what's happening in my body? What patterns do I see? What helps? What doesn't? The more you observe, the less you panic. The less you panic, the more control returns. And something beautiful happens. The pain becomes less personal. It becomes something happening in you, not to you. And from that space, calm begins to grow. Even if your body trembles, even if your thoughts race, your inner scientist watches quietly and takes notes. And sometimes that's all it takes to survive the worst hour of the day, not escaping the discomfort, but understanding it until it no longer owns you. Use rhythmic tapping or drumming to regulate anxiety. Using rhythmic tapping or drumming is a primal, almost hypnotic survival technique, one that bypasses words, thoughts, and even reason to reach the part of you that's just trying to feel safe again. When anxiety tightens your chest, speeds your heart, and turns your hands into trembling ghosts, rhythm can become your anchor. It doesn't require tools. It doesn't need permission. Just your fingers, your breath, and a surface to touch. You begin with something simple. 2 fingers tapping against your thigh. A steady beat. Tap, tap, tap. Or maybe a soft knock on the ground. A palm against your chest. A stone against your hand. Not frantic, not random, steady. You breathe with it. You fall into it. You let your nervous system feel the repetition. Because rhythm is memory. Rhythm is safety. Your body remembers a mother's heartbeat, a drum by a fire, the pulse of footsteps in steady motion. This isn't a distraction. It's recalibration. Your body tunes itself to whatever beat it feels. When anxiety plays chaos, your rhythm plays order. You're sending a message beneath language. We are okay. We are still here. This is the rhythm of control. In that rhythm, thought slows. You begin to return to your body, Not through force, but through sound, through vibration, through the physical proof that something is in your control. And maybe you start humming. Maybe your heartbeat matches the rhythm. Maybe the fear doesn't vanish, but it no longer leads. This is what survival sometimes looks like. Not roaring defiance, but a steady tap in the dark. A beat you make with your own hands. A reminder that chaos may be loud, but rhythm, even quiet, always wins. Imagine your survival inspiring someone in the future. Imagining your survival inspiring someone in the future is a deeply emotional and profoundly motivating psychological survival technique, one that lifts you out of the small, suffocating space of now and projects your fight into a future where it matters. When you're exhausted, numb, trembling in silence, or soaked in fear, your mind turns inward and dark. It whispers, "No one will know. This doesn't count. I'm invisible." But when you imagine someone watching your struggle as a story of hope, something lights up inside you. Significance. You picture them clearly. A stranger, a child, someone broken in a similar way, someone standing on the edge of quitting like you are now. But instead of falling, they remember you, your story, your strength. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. They remember how you crawled forward when everything said, stop. How you endured when there was no applause, no audience, just will. Maybe they read about you. Maybe they hear your voice in a recording. Maybe it's a story told quietly by someone you once helped without knowing it. And in that moment, your survival becomes someone else's oxygen. This visualization gives meaning to struggle that feels meaningless. It reframes pain as legacy. It tells you, even if no one sees you now, someone will someday, and they will live differently because you didn't give up. You don't need fame. You don't need your name in lights. You just need to know this. Someone out there will survive because you did, and your scars, your endurance, your quiet refusal to break, that will be the map they use when they're lost. Create a private symbol for hope you can draw in the dirt. Creating a private symbol for hope, a simple mark you can draw in the dirt, trace on your skin, or carve into wood, is a quiet but fiercely powerful psychological survival tool. When words fail and time feels endless, when isolation stretches on and your spirit begins to thin, this symbol becomes your anchor, not because it's magic, not because it changes your situation, but because you chose it. And when everything else feels taken from you, that choice still belongs to you. You design it yourself. Maybe it's a spiral, a triangle within a circle, a single line with a break and a return. Maybe it's an old rune, a letter, or something abstract that only makes sense to you. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters that you decide what it means. You say, this is the symbol for holding on. This is what I draw when I can't speak. This is the mark of me still fighting. You draw it when you feel despair tightening around you. You etch it into dust with your finger, scratch it into stone, trace it onto your arm with trembling hands. Each time it becomes a signal to yourself. You are still here. You are still choosing to believe there's something ahead worth reaching. This tiny ritual cuts through the noise. It doesn't beg for rescue. It doesn't try to explain. It simply exists. Like you, it survives. And that act, the marking of something sacred, even if it's just a line in the dirt, is defiance. It's a promise. And some days, that mark might be the only thing you make. But it's enough. It's everything. Visualize a mentor's advice in extreme situations. Visualizing a mentor's advice in extreme situations is a psychological lifeline, a way to summon clarity, courage, and direction when your own thoughts are drowning in panic or exhaustion. In high-stress survival moments, the mind can go silent or scream at you in fear. Decision-making collapses. You freeze, act impulsively, or spiral into despair. But if you can close your eyes, even for a second, and hear the voice of someone wise, everything shifts. This mentor doesn't need to be real.
They can be someone you once knew, someone you admire, or someone entirely imagined. It could be your grandfather, a soldier, a fictional guide, even your ideal future self. What matters is that they carry calm authority. You picture them standing beside you, not panicked, not afraid. You hear them say your name, maybe touch your shoulder, and then they speak. They don't give vague encouragement. They give instructions. Slow your breathing. Don't rush. You faced worse. This is just a test. One move at a time. Look again. Their voice cuts through the noise. And because it's not coming from your fear, it feels stronger. It feels trustworthy. You start listening. This visualization activates the part of your mind that knows what to do, but forgets in moments of chaos. The mentor is your emotional translator, your anchor. Even if your heart is racing, their voice stays steady. It becomes a script you return to when nothing else is clear. And the more often you use this trick, the more natural it becomes, until one day, in your worst moment, you realize the mentor was never outside of you. They were always the strongest part of you, waiting to be heard. Use invisible allies to simulate group decision-making. Using invisible allies to simulate group decision-making is a brilliant psychological strategy for surviving isolation, indecision, and fear-driven paralysis. When you're truly alone, cut off from feedback, companionship, or even sound, your mind begins to echo. Choices feel heavier. Doubt grows louder. You start to question everything. But when you summon invisible allies, you recreate the dynamics of a team, and suddenly you're not deciding alone. You're leading. You select your allies deliberately. They don't need to be real. They don't even need to be human. You choose people or figures you trust, past mentors, fictional warriors, brilliant minds, loyal friends, ancestors you never met. Each one represents a perspective: logic, compassion, risk, caution, grit. When you face a decision, you mentally sit them around a table. You speak as them. You ask, what would they say? What would they argue? What would they challenge? Maybe one says, go now, don't hesitate. Another whispers, wait, conserve your energy. A third says nothing, just stares, demanding your integrity. This isn't fantasy, it's strategic imagination. You are activating different parts of your own mind by assigning them voices. It sharpens your thinking. It breaks the isolation. It pulls you out of emotional fog and into collaborative clarity, even if you're the only one there. And sometimes, in a moment of deep fear, one of those voices, your boldest, bravest ally, will say something that changes everything. We've got this. You are not alone. Move forward. And just like that, you feel the presence of strength beside you, real or not, and it's enough to take the next step. Invent a sacred object to represent resilience. Inventing a sacred object to represent resilience is a powerful psychological survival ritual, one that gives shape to inner strength when it feels invisible, and permanence to courage when everything around you is temporary. In isolation, in darkness, in pain, your sense of self can start to erode. You forget who you were. You question who you are. But when you create a sacred object, real or imagined, you carve a symbol of endurance into the chaos. It becomes proof that you are still here. This object doesn't need to exist physically. It can live in your pocket, in your hand, or only in your mind. Maybe it's a small stone, worn smooth, a ring, a feather, a string tied around your wrist. Maybe it's completely imaginary, a glowing ember in your palm, a coin from another world, a shard of armor made from every moment you didn't quit. You name it. You assign it meaning. This represents every time I got back up. This holds the part of me that doesn't break. This reminds me who I become when it hurts the most. You return to it when you're shaking, when the world feels unreal, when giving up starts whispering. You touch it. You imagine its weight. You tell yourself, this is my strength. It exists. I've built it. The sacred object becomes your totem of resilience.
not because it fixes anything, but because it anchors you. It carries your fight, a fight. It reminds you that no matter how stripped down the world becomes, there is still something you protect, something you refuse to let die. Even if it's just a pebble or a whisper of light, it's yours, and it's unbreakable. Use movie or book characters as behavioral models. Using movie or book characters as behavioral models is a deeply effective psychological survival method, especially when your own strength feels distant or buried. In extreme conditions, when fear clouds your instincts and exhaustion makes you question who you are, sometimes the best way to move forward is to borrow the strength of someone who never truly existed. Fictional or not, these characters can become mental armor, voices of courage, and templates for action. You pick someone who embodies what you need: stoicism, cleverness, endurance, humor under fire. Maybe it's Max from Mad Max, Katniss from The Hunger Games, Aragorn, Ripley, Jason Bourne, or a forgotten side character who always knew what to do. You don't just think about them, you step into them. You ask, what would they do right now? How would they breathe, walk, decide, speak? This technique activates psychological modeling, rewiring your brain to match the behavior of someone you admire. Your posture changes, your pace sharpens, you start to think in their tone, view your obstacles through their eyes. And because the brain responds to imagery and belief, this isn't fake, it's transformation. You've tapped into the version of yourself that knows how to be like them, even when you don't believe in yourself yet. These characters become internal guides, allies, ghosts of resilience you carry with you. They are the calm in your panic, the fire in your stillness. And when your voice trembles or your vision blurs, you can whisper, "Be like them," and watch yourself rise, not as someone else, but as the strongest version of you they've awakened. Think in third person, "He is staying calm," instead of "I am." Thinking in third person during moments of extreme stress is a subtle but profoundly effective psychological survival trick. It creates just enough distance between you and your fear to keep you functional when everything inside wants to fall apart. When panic floods your system, when pain overwhelms or isolation distorts your sense of reality, saying "I'm scared" can make the fear feel like your whole identity. But when you switch to "She is scared, but she's thinking clearly," something shifts. You become the observer, not the overwhelmed. This is called distance self-talk, and it works because it changes your perspective. Athletes, soldiers, and crisis survivors use it instinctively. You stop speaking from the fear and start speaking about the person experiencing it. That person is still you, but now you see them with empathy, clarity, and even admiration. He's tired, but he's still moving. She's hurting, but she hasn't stopped. This trick calms the nervous system. It gives you a voice that feels stronger than the one trapped in emotion. And most importantly, it reminds you that the part of you observing the pain is not in pain. It's calm, it's steady, it's capable of making decisions. In survival, identity can become poisoned by suffering. But third-person thinking reclaims control. You can narrate your resilience like a story unfolding in real time. He's in the storm, but he's not lost. She's afraid, but she's choosing to keep going. It might seem like language, but it's leadership. It's the voice that pulls you out of panic and reminds you, you are not your fear. You are the one watching it pass. Draw a survival timeline in your mind. Drawing a survival timeline in your mind is a quiet, disciplined act of mental rebellion against the chaos that tries to convince you there is no end. When you're lost in a stretch of uncertainty, where each day bleeds into the next, where the past feels like fiction and the future like fog, this timeline becomes your anchor. It gives shape to time. It reminds you that this moment, no matter how endless it feels, is just one point on a longer journey. You start by closing your eyes and building the line. Not with dates, not with clocks, but with events that matter. You mark where you started, day one, or
the collapse, or the walkout. Then you add what came after: the night I didn't break, the fire I built, the wound that healed, the choice I made to keep going. You draw forward, not in perfect clarity, but with intent. The moment I find water again, the moment I laugh, the moment I get out. Each point you place becomes a story, a memory, a future. It doesn't have to be beautiful, it just has to exist. That timeline becomes proof that your life has direction, even if you can't see the destination. You revisit it daily. You move the marker forward, even a single inch. You say, "This is where I am. This is not forever. I am on the way." And suddenly, you're not trapped. You're in motion. You're not just enduring. You're traveling through time, one survival milestone at a time, towards something that is waiting for you to arrive. Create a training montage for yourself in imagination. Creating a training montage in your imagination is a psychological survival technique that taps into determination, transformation, and the raw emotional charge of becoming more than you are in this moment. When you feel weak, stagnant, or broken, when time stretches and survival feels like repetition without reward, you close your eyes and you begin to see your evolution, not as a vague hope, but as a vivid cinematic sequence that your brain can feel in real time. You picture yourself rising at dawn, dirty, bruised, but unyielding. You see your hands practicing movements, solving problems, adapting. You watch yourself stumble, fail, recover, try again. Maybe you're lifting rocks, sprinting up imaginary hills, building fires with blistered fingers, enduring pain with new calm in your eyes. You hear your breath, you feel your muscles, you create your own soundtrack, drums, violins, static, and thunder. It's gritty, not glamorous, but it's yours. This isn't fantasy. This is neurological conditioning. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagined effort and real effort. When you visualize training, learning, enduring, you prime your body and mind for the real thing. You rehearse grit. You rehearse growth. You start to believe, "I am changing, even now." And as the montage unfolds, you create a before and after. You're not stuck. You're becoming. Every drop of sweat in that mental sequence is proof that you are not done yet. The montage tells you this is not where the story ends. This is the part where you rise. And suddenly, even in stillness, you are moving. Even in silence, you are preparing. And no one, not even pain, can take that from you. Use internal GPS metaphors. You are 70% through this valley. Using internal GPS metaphors is a psychological survival method that gives your mind a sense of forward motion when reality feels like you're standing still, or worse, stuck. In isolation, pain, or long-term struggle, time can lose its shape. You feel suspended in an endless now, and hopelessness begins to whisper that this is forever. But when you install a metaphorical GPS inside your mind, you take back the power of perspective. You orient yourself. You imagine a map, your own private terrain of survival, mountains for pain, valleys for depression, forests for confusion, plateaus for numbness, peaks for triumph. You become both the traveler and the guide. You check in and say, "You've already crossed 60% of this barren stretch. Just another push to the ridge. The last storm was worse than this one." You're not lost, you're just inside a long turn. This reframes suffering as movement. It stops your brain from fixating on the discomfort and starts training it to look for progress. Even when nothing seems to change on the outside, your internal GPS says, "You're advancing, slowly, but always forward." You assign percentages. You're 80% through this pain spike, 50% through the emotional dip. This is just a long mile. You've walked farther before, and something magical happens. Your body begins to believe it. You feel less trapped, less blind, because you're not just surviving in chaos, you're navigating it. Every time you feel lost, you hear the voice inside quietly rerouting, still on track, still moving. estimated time to relief, closer than you think. Name each day creatively, e.g., day of stone endurance. Naming each day creatively is a psychological survival technique that reclaims time from meaninglessness and turns it into something sacred, personal, and defiant. When you're isolated or enduring extreme conditions, days begin to lose their edges. One bleeds into the next, and the silence grows heavier. Without markers, time becomes an enemy, a slow drift, a fog that erases progress. But when you give each day a name, you declare it yours. You write a title across its spine and make it unforgettable. You don't call it Tuesday. You call it the day of unbreakable silence. Not Thursday, but the day of fire and wind. You name it, the day of the scarred hand, the day I did not bow, the day of hollow hunger, or the day of quiet victory. The name doesn't need to be poetic. It just needs to reflect what that day asked of you, what you endured, or how you showed up despite it all. This act turns survival into story. It gives emotional texture to time. It makes each sunrise feel like a new chapter, not just a repetition. And later, when you look back, it's not just another hard day. It's the day of stone endurance. That means something. The naming ritual also sets intention. You can claim the name before the day begins. Today is the day I rise through pain. Or you can name it at the end, a battle cry disguised as a title. Either way, you're creating history inside your own survival. Because if time won't honor what you've lived through, you will. Assign animal spirits to different mindsets. Wolf for courage, owl for wisdom. Assigning animal spirits to different mindsets is a survival technique that reconnects you to instinct, archetype, and inner power when words lose meaning and logic fades. In the raw moments, when language becomes static, when you're too overwhelmed to think in strategies, you feel your way through. This is where animal spirits step in. You call upon them not as fantasy, but as symbolic function. They are fragments of you, each with a purpose, each ready when called. You don't say, I need to be brave right now. You say, bring the wolf. The wolf stands tall, eyes burning, shoulders firm. You feel its presence in your body. Your breath deepens, your vision sharpens, your doubt shrinks. The wolf doesn't care if you're afraid. It moves anyway. That's how you cross the dark woods. When clarity is needed, you summon the owl. It sits still in the mental branches of your mind, observing without reacting. It doesn't speak often, but when it does, its wisdom cuts through panic. The owl sees what others miss. It teaches you to wait, to read the patterns, to know before acting. Maybe the bear is your protector, the fox, your strategist, the stag, your dignity, the serpent, your adaptability. You assign them roles, you learn their voices, and when crisis comes, you don't ask, what do I do? You ask, who do I need to become right now? This transforms survival into ritual. It creates mental allies inside you, and in moments of exhaustion, you stop feeling alone. You feel the pack, the wings, the claws, the eyes, and you remember, you are made of more than fear. You are instinct wrapped in myth, walking forward with every animal spirit your fight demands. Keep a mental survival score and reward yourself for progress. Keeping a mental survival score is a quiet yet powerful psychological tactic, a way to make the invisible victories visible, to track your persistence when no one else is watching, and to remind yourself that every moment endured counts. In survival, progress is rarely dramatic. It's not climbing a mountain in one leap. It's not quitting for one more hour. It's choosing to move when you could stay down. It's taking a deep breath when panic tries to crush you. But if you don't track those wins, your mind forgets them. That's where the score comes in. You make it your own. Maybe every hour survived earns a point. Every time you calm your breath before fear takes over, another point. If you eat when your appetite's gone, push through pain, resist despair, or do anything hard without breaking, that's a point. 10 points for getting through the night, 100 for not giving up when it would have been easy to.
This is not about judgment or perfection. It's about giving yourself credit. Real, personal, internal credit. When everything feels meaningless, this score becomes your silent proof that it's not. And then, just as importantly, you reward it. Not with comfort or escape, but with something sacred. A moment of recognition. A whispered, "You did that." A hand over your heart. A name for the day. A made-up medal. Because in survival, progress can feel like nothing. But it's everything. And when you give it value, when you score the pain, the push, the persistence, you begin to believe again, I am not losing. I am winning this in the smallest, fiercest ways. Mentally simulate next-level challenges to increase tolerance. Mentally simulating next-level challenges is a brutal but incredibly effective psychological survival technique, one that trains your mind to expand its tolerance by rehearsing something even harder than what you're currently facing. When you're trapped in pain, exhaustion, cold, hunger, or fear, your brain wants to declare, "This is the worst. I can't take any more." But the truth is, you can. You just haven't practiced suffering beyond this level yet. That's what this trick does. It sharpens you through imagined adversity. You close your eyes and say, what if it got worse? Not to torture yourself, but to build capacity. If you're freezing, you imagine the temperature dropping another 10 degrees. If you're exhausted, you imagine having to carry something heavier for longer. If you're starving, you imagine another day without food. You go there in your mind, and then you watch yourself endure it. You visualize your response, your breath staying steady, your movements slowing but precise, your spirit not breaking. You say, if I can handle that, I can handle this. And your current challenge, while still hard, starts to feel survivable because you've mentally rehearsed worse. You've trained yourself to stretch. This isn't masochism, it's psychological armor. It resets your limits. The pain may still exist, but now it feels one level below what you've already prepared for. And that gap between what is and what could be is where grit lives. It's where your survival instincts rise, because now you're not just enduring, you're conditioning yourself for the next round. You're proving that you are harder to break than anything your mind feared. Create rituals around sleep and wake up to maintain stability. Creating rituals around sleep and wake up is a deeply grounding psychological survival practice, one that restores rhythm in a world stripped of routine and protects the fragile boundary between one day and the next. In survival situations, especially in isolation, time becomes formless. Nights bleed into days. Sleep is shallow or erratic. Waking up feels less like renewal and more like restarting a sentence you never wanted to finish. But when you build rituals, intentional, repeated, meaningful acts, you give structure to the storm. At night, you mark the ending. You speak a phrase aloud. This day is done. You clean your hands, arrange your space, hum a tune, or count breaths. Maybe you speak to someone who's not there, or say thank you for just surviving. You signal to your brain, it's safe to rest. This isn't just hygiene, it's psychological shelter, a doorway you walk through, even if you're sleeping on the cold ground. And in the morning, no matter how broken you feel, you perform a ritual of return. You name the day. This is day of the rising breath. You sit up with intention. Maybe you stretch, take 10 slow inhales, repeat a mantra, or mentally check off a list. I am alive. I am aware. I will face what comes. That act of conscious waking gives you yourself back. These rituals don't need to be elaborate. They need to be consistent. When everything else slips, they stay. When your mind is fractured, they repair. When fear is loud, they whisper. You are still in control of how your day begins and ends. And sometimes that's all you need to make it through another one. Break mental spirals by changing posture dramatically. Breaking mental spirals by changing your posture dramatically is a fast, visceral psychological survival technique.
a raw, physical interruption to the storm inside your head. When fear, hopelessness, or obsessive thoughts start circling like vultures, your body usually collapses with them. Shoulders slump, eyes drop, breathing shallows. Your entire posture folds in on itself like a body trying to disappear. But the body is not just responding to the mind, it's reinforcing it, and that means you can use it to break the cycle. You do this deliberately, even violently if you must. You sit up straight. You stand suddenly. You throw your shoulders back. You spread your arms. You walk 10 steps like a soldier. You raise your chin like a fighter before the final round. Your body doesn't wait for your brain to catch up. It leads. This jolt sends a shockwave through your nervous system. It overrides the spiral with a new signal. We're not collapsing. We're rising. Posture tells your mind what story it's in. Curled up like prey, you're in the narrative of defeat. Standing tall, chest open, you're in the narrative of resistance, of fight. You can speak aloud while you move. Say, "I'm not going down like this," or "Stand up, now." These sharp physical shifts pull you out of mental quicksand. They don't erase the fear, but they interrupt its momentum. You become a moving object again, no longer trapped in looping thought, because sometimes the brain won't listen to reason, but it will listen to the body that just stood like it means to survive. Use slow motion imagination to interrupt panic. Using slow motion imagination is a powerful psychological technique for surviving moments when panic hijacks your body, floods your mind, and turns thought into static. Panic feels like a rush, fast, loud, suffocating. Your heartbeat races, your breath shortens, everything speeds up, and your thoughts scatter like birds under gunfire. But if you can slow it down, even in your mind, you regain control of the narrative. You interrupt the storm before it drowns you. This trick starts with intention. The moment you feel panic rising, tight chest, racing thoughts, shaking hands, you close your eyes and visualize yourself in slow motion. Picture your hand reaching for something. Watch your fingers move like syrup. Picture yourself standing in wind, but time has slowed. A leaf falls beside you, slowly. Your breath comes in like smoke. Everything moves with gravity, with weight, like you're walking through water. And because your brain is watching slowness, it starts to become it. Your thoughts follow. You mentally narrate what's happening, not with urgency, but with control. I am standing. I am breathing. I am not in danger right now. I am watching the fear, not feeding it. The act of imagining your body slowing down actually signals your nervous system to do the same. Heart rate drops. Cortisol fades. The terror breaks. This isn't about denial, it's disruption. Panic thrives on momentum. Slow motion imagination breaks its rhythm, steals its fuel, and replaces chaos with intention. And once you've interrupted it, even for a few seconds, you can step back into reality, not as a victim of fear, but as the one who remembered how to slow down when everything tried to speed you up. Act as if you're teaching someone else survival techniques. Acting as if you're teaching someone else how to survive is a powerful psychological maneuver that transforms helplessness into leadership. When fear crushes your chest, when doubt whispers that you're not strong enough, when the situation feels bigger than you, this technique shifts the narrative. You stop asking, "How will I get through this?" and start asking, "What would I teach someone else to do right now?" And in that moment, you rise above your own panic to become a guide, even if the only person listening is you. You imagine someone next to you, maybe a child, a scared younger version of yourself, a stranger who has never endured what you're enduring now, and you become the voice they need to hear. You explain the next step aloud. This is how we stay calm. This is how we breathe when we're scared. This is how we keep moving even when it hurts. You demonstrate, not just for yourself, but for them. Suddenly, you're not just surviving, you're leading, and that mental shift gives you power. It demands clarity. It forces action. You don't collapse under emotion, you step into responsibility.
because now someone's counting on you, and your mind doesn't care if they're real or imagined. Your instinct to protect and instruct takes over. This technique creates mental structure, emotional distance, purpose. It quiets the storm by forcing you to focus on what matters now. You stop spiraling because a leader doesn't spiral, they guide. And in the process of saving this imagined student, you begin to realize you've just saved yourself. Invent a daily code word for hope. Inventing a daily code word for hope is a subtle but deeply intimate survival ritual, a way to carry light in your pocket without letting the world know you're holding it. In the darkest conditions, when despair becomes the background noise of your thoughts, when your body moves but your soul forgets why, hope can feel fragile, even embarrassing. But when you cloak it in a private word, you protect it, you name it, and that name becomes a quiet lifeline. Each morning, you choose a new word. It could be anything: ember, anchor, feather, rise, zero, lantern, pulse, unseen. You don't have to explain it, you just have to feel it. It's your symbol, your mantra, your secret reminder that this day still matters. You repeat it in your mind during moments of stillness or strain. You whisper it before you eat. You write it in the dirt with your finger. You breathe it before you sleep. It becomes a signal. I'm still here. I still believe in something. This code word is yours alone. No one else has to hear it, understand it, or even know it exists. That's what makes it powerful. It turns hope into a private resistance, gentle but defiant. It becomes your shield against the grind of meaningless repetition, your reply to the voice that says, "Why bother?" And on the hardest days, you might carry the same word for more than one sunrise. You might cling to it like fire, because this code isn't just a word, it's a signal to yourself that even now, even here, there is still a flicker worth protecting, and you are the one who chooses to carry it. Envision your suffering turning into a source of strength. Envisioning your suffering turning into a source of strength is not about denying the pain, it's about reclaiming it. It's a survival technique that shifts the story from, "This is destroying me," to, "This is building me into something I wasn't before." When you're hurting, physically, emotionally, spiritually, it's easy to feel like you're being hollowed out. But what if that hollow space isn't emptiness? What if it's capacity? You close your eyes and imagine your pain as raw material, heavy, dark, formless. Then you start shaping it. You melt it down with your tears. You hammer it with your breath. You forge it into something: armor, a weapon, a backbone made of fire. You say to yourself, "This will not just scar me, it will sculpt me." The agony isn't wasted, it's being used. Every moment endured becomes muscle, grit, knowledge. Every heartbreak becomes empathy. Every failure becomes foresight. You begin to believe, "I will carry this pain like a torch, not a wound." You walk differently. You stop seeing your suffering as a curse and start seeing it as the very thing that's sharpening your edge. The weight you thought would break you becomes resistance training, and over time, it lifts you. This mental shift doesn't end the pain, but it transforms your relationship with it. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" You ask, "What am I becoming because of this?" And the answer, whispered in the quiet of your suffering, is something unshakable, something stronger than before. Use phantom journaling. Pretend to write thoughts out. Using phantom journaling is a psychological survival trick that gives your emotions somewhere to go, even when you don't have paper, a pen, or even the energy to write. In moments of isolation, chaos, or emotional overload, thoughts can spiral into noise. They pile up, loop endlessly, and press against your mind like a rising tide with no outlet. But when you pretend to write them down, you reclaim control. You give form to the formless. You create release where none exists. You do it silently, in your head, or with invisible gestures. You sit down, or just pause, and imagine the page in front of you. You feel the weight of the pen,
the scratch of it across paper, and you begin. Today I felt like giving up around noon. My chest was tight. I hated the silence, but I kept going. I made it to this hour. That means something. You don't rush. You let the words unspool as if you were really writing them. You can go deep. You can rage, cry, reflect. You can confess things you'd never say aloud, and when you're done, you mentally sign it, fold it, store it. The mind responds to this as if it were real. Emotions start to soften. Thoughts become clearer. The act of phantom journaling signals to your brain, I'm processing, I'm paying attention, I'm not being swallowed. It's quiet, invisible, and often more powerful than you expect. When you have nothing, no tools, no privacy, no time, you still have this. A blank page in your mind and the choice to write your pain into something coherent, something yours, something survivable. Make a habit of small, symbolic acts of control, e.g., organizing rocks. Making a habit of small, symbolic acts of control is a powerful psychological survival practice that anchors your mind when everything else feels unmanageable. In extreme conditions, whether physical chaos or mental collapse, your brain searches desperately for something it can still direct. When food is scarce, when time is meaningless, when your body aches and fear loops endlessly, even the smallest act of control becomes a declaration. I am not powerless here. You find something near you, a few rocks, a corner of your shelter, the way your gear is laid out, and you arrange it, not because it needs to be perfect, but because you chose to make it that way. You align stones into a pattern. You stack twigs by size. You clean a square foot of space and keep it pristine. These actions may seem trivial, but they send a critical signal to your brain. I still have influence. I still create order. I still decide something. It's not about the outcome. It's about ritual. Repeating this kind of small task builds rhythm in the chaos. It soothes. It grounds. It cuts through helplessness like a thread through fabric. These moments become tiny victories, a private rebellion against the disorder trying to swallow you. And over time, these acts accumulate. They become a language your mind starts to understand. We endure through intention. We protect our sanity by touching the world with purpose. Even if all you can do is arrange rocks, do it deliberately. Because that pattern on the ground, that's not just design, that's proof. You still matter here. You still shape your world. Simulate reviews of your performance by a kind mentor. Simulating reviews of your performance by a kind mentor is a profound psychological survival technique that restores self-worth when the world offers no feedback, no encouragement, and no witness to your pain. In long, silent stretches of hardship, when you feel like you're doing everything alone, it's easy to believe your effort doesn't matter. You survive a brutal hour, endure fear, make the hard choice to keep going, and no one sees it. No one says, "Good job. That was brave," and that silence can eat you alive. But then you bring in the mentor, not a critic, not a drill sergeant, a mentor, wise, calm, compassionate. You imagine them sitting across from you at the end of the day, maybe holding a notebook or just watching you closely. They saw it all. They saw how tired you were when you stood up anyway. They saw the trembling in your hands when you stayed calm. They saw the tears you wiped away in the dark. And now they speak. That was incredible. You didn't have to do any of that, but you did. You adapted. You endured. You kept your dignity even when no one was watching. I'm proud of you. You let yourself hear it. You accept the praise. You allow the warmth to settle into your chest. This mental review isn't delusion. It's necessary repair. It gives your nervous system what it craves: affirmation, acknowledgement, compassion. It turns your survival into something witnessed, validated, named. And in the quiet that follows, you begin to feel something sacred, the belief that even in your darkest hours, you were never invisible. You were seen, and you did well. Invent a fictional rival to out-survive.
Inventing a fictional rival to outsurvive is a gritty, competitive psychological survival strategy that injects fire into your fight when motivation fades into numbness. When you're isolated, worn down, or drifting in mental fog, the voice inside your head starts whispering surrender. But when you create a rival, someone just as tough, just as scarred, just as desperate to survive, you suddenly have a reason to push harder, not just to live, but to win. This rival isn't your enemy. They're your equal. Maybe they're a soldier in another valley, a castaway across the mountains, a mirror version of yourself who won't quit either. They're strong, clever, relentless. Every time you hesitate, they're moving. Every time you consider giving up, they take another step. You can almost feel their breath on the back of your neck. They're still going. Are you? You give them a name, a face, a backstory. You picture their survival routine. You imagine them making it through nights colder than yours, pushing through terrain rougher than yours, and now it's a race, a test, a silent war of willpower. You can't control the weather, you can't control the odds, but you can control whether you let your rival outlast you. This mental trick doesn't make your pain disappear, but it channels it. It gives your suffering a target, a context. It sharpens your edge. You don't get lazy because your rival never rests. You don't stay down because they would rise. And in trying to beat them, this ghost you invented, you become something harder, sharper, faster. And maybe one day, when you're standing on the other side of all this, you'll smile and whisper, "You almost had me." Reframe cold as cleansing, hunger as sharpening. Reframing cold as cleansing and hunger as sharpening is a psychological survival technique that transforms suffering from something that breaks you into something that builds you. In the raw grip of nature or hardship, the elements don't care how much pain you're in. The cold bites, the hunger gnaws, and you feel like you're being slowly dismantled. But then, through sheer will, you flip the narrative. You choose the meaning. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "This is how I am being refined." The cold is no longer just a threat. It becomes purification. Every shiver, every gust of wind across your face strips away weakness, ego, illusion. It becomes a baptism by endurance. You imagine it burning away fear, burning away excuses, hardening your resolve with each freezing breath. You don't run from it. You meet it. You let it carve a sharper version of you. Hunger, too, transforms. Instead of a hollow ache, it becomes a forge. You say, "This sharpens me. This makes me faster, leaner, clearer." Your senses heighten. Your attention focuses. You feel more alive in your emptiness than others do in their comfort. Hunger becomes fuel, not a curse. It reminds you what it means to want, to hunt, to need something so badly you would crawl toward it. This reframing isn't denial. It's dominance. You're not changing reality. You're changing your relationship to it. And in doing so, you strip the power from pain. You become the one who grows because of the cold, the one who fights because of the hunger, the one who refuses to suffer passively because you are too busy turning it all into strength. Visualize a cord connecting you to life that cannot be cut. Visualizing a cord connecting you to life, a cord that cannot, under any circumstance, be cut, is a raw and powerful psychological survival technique for when you're on the edge, when everything feels too heavy, too hopeless, too quiet. In those moments, the mind searches for something, anything to hold on to. This is that thing, a lifeline, a symbol of your unbreakable link to existence. You imagine the cord in vivid detail. Maybe it's red and glowing, maybe it's thick like a steel cable, or delicate like thread, but impossibly strong. It extends from your chest, your spine, your gut, wherever your will lives. On the other end, it tethers you to life itself, not a person, not a place, but life, raw, wild, sacred. It doesn't matter how deep the dark gets, how alone you are, how broken you feel, that cord holds. You picture it pulsing slightly, warm and alive.
You feel it when you breathe. You whisper to it, you don't let go. I don't let go. It stretches but never snaps. It keeps you tethered when your thoughts try to drift into oblivion. When your emotions try to dissolve you, that cord stays. You can scream, you can fall, but you can't sever it. This cord becomes your promise. It is silent and invisible, but real. It says, I am still connected. I am still here. And in the worst hour, when your heart beats just to keep from quitting, you don't have to hold the world. You just have to hold the cord. And you do, because it never, ever lets go. Label emotions with animal names to depersonalize them. Labeling emotions with animal names is a surprisingly powerful psychological survival technique, one that helps you stop drowning in your feelings and start observing them from the outside. In moments of fear, rage, despair, or shame, emotions feel like identity. I am anxious, I am angry, I am hopeless. And when you say it like that, you become the feeling. It owns you. But when you name it something else, when you call it a creature instead of a truth, it suddenly becomes manageable, separate, not you. You feel panic rising? That's not me losing it. That's the black fox, fast, jumpy, darting around in your chest. Naming it helps you watch it, understand it, breathe through it. You feel a wave of grief? That's the gray elephant, heavy, slow, quiet. It sits with you, but it doesn't have to crush you. Anger? Maybe that's the red hawk, sharp, flaring, quick to strike. Loneliness becomes the hollow owl. Shame, the snake with no eyes. You decide what they are, how they move, what they want, and then you talk to them. You say, I see you, Red Hawk. I know you're here because I feel cornered, but I'm not going to attack today. Or, hello, Gray Elephant. You can sit here, but I'm still going to move. This language gives you power. It creates distance. It turns emotional overwhelm into a conversation, not a prison. You don't suppress the emotion. You tame it. You study its habits. You learn its nature. And slowly you realize you are not your beasts. You are their keeper, and they do not get to lead. You do. Use mental rooms to compartmentalize fear, doubt, etc. Using mental rooms to compartmentalize fear, doubt, anger, and exhaustion is a psychological survival technique that creates inner architecture, space inside the storm. When your thoughts are crashing over each other, when emotion floods your system like a broken dam, this technique gives you walls, it gives you doors, it gives you control. You begin by visualizing your mind as a house. Inside are rooms, each with a purpose. There's a fear room where anxiety lives, a doubt room full of what-ifs and heavy shadows, a memory room holding grief and ghosts, but there are other rooms too. The logic room, clean and sharp, the courage room, lit like a forge, the calm room with still water and quiet air. When you feel overwhelmed, you don't let all those voices scream at once. You walk through the halls of your mind. You choose which room to enter. You say, fear belongs here, not everywhere. You place the panic in the fear room and shut the door. You go sit in the courage room for a while. You let the logic room speak. If a thought doesn't belong where you are, you move it. You assign it a space. This visualization restores separation. It turns a single suffocating space into a house you can walk through. It makes chaos navigable, and it reminds you, I have more than just fear inside me. I have strength, I have clarity, I have control over where I go next. You can't stop the storm, but you can choose which rooms it's allowed to enter, and sometimes that's enough to keep standing. Pretend you're in a simulation game you're determined to beat. Pretending you're in a simulation game you're determined to beat is a psychological survival tactic that gamifies struggle, rewires despair into challenge, and replaces helplessness with strategy. When life feels unlivable, when you're cold, exhausted, or utterly alone, and nothing around you seems real, this mental shift can save you. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how do I level up through this?
You imagine it, a high difficulty simulation, hyper-realistic, every sensation, hunger, fatigue, fear, designed to test your endurance, every obstacle, deliberately placed. You weren't dropped here by accident. You signed up for this. You chose the hardest settings because you wanted to see what you're made of. Now, every action becomes gameplay, finding clean water, bonus objective, enduring emotional collapse without giving up, hidden achievement, getting through one more day, major XP. Even your emotions become part of the system. Fear is a debuff that makes you think faster. Loneliness is a dark fog mechanic. But here's the twist. You're still in control of your choices. You can adapt. You can survive. You can win. This frame doesn't make the pain go away. It makes it narrative. It makes it interactive. And when you feel like quitting, you remind yourself, there's a version of me watching this playthrough later, and I want them to be proud of how I handled this part. It's not delusion, it's design. You turn meaningless suffering into meaningful progress, and the game doesn't end when you break. It ends when you refuse to try, so you play, and you play to win. Use grit phrases, short sentences linked to your deepest values. Using grit phrases is a survival technique that gives your pain a voice with purpose. When your body is shaking, when your heart feels hollow, when the air is thick with fear and nothing seems to matter, these short, fierce sentences become anchors. They are not motivational fluff. They are declarations born from who you are when everything else is stripped away. A grit phrase isn't about hype. It's about identity. It's what you say when your strength is running dry, but your soul refuses to stop. I don't bow. Still breathing, still fighting. This is the part that matters. Earn the scars. No one finishes my story but me. These aren't just words. They're weapons. They link your will to your values, courage, loyalty, endurance, defiance, love. You say them out loud. You whisper them. You repeat them until they burn through the fog. You create them yourself. You choose language that feels like blood and fire, not perfection. Maybe it's messy. Maybe it's sharp. Maybe it's something no one else would understand. But when you say it, your spine straightens. Your breath steadies. You remember not what's happening, but who you are inside of it. Grit phrases aren't about pretending it's easy. They're about deciding it's worth it. In the darkest hour, when there are no witnesses, no finish lines, no applause, these phrases become the reason you don't let go. They speak louder than pain, louder than fear, louder than the voice telling you to stop, because they come from a place deeper than fear ever reaches, and that's where survival is born. Translate emotion into weather. My mind is cloudy now. Translating emotion into weather is a poetic yet practical psychological survival technique, one that softens the intensity of your inner experience by giving it shape, texture, and distance. When you feel consumed by emotion, rage, despair, dread, it can feel like it is you, like you are the storm. But when you shift the language, my mind is cloudy instead of I'm lost, or there's a storm passing through instead of I can't handle this, you reclaim a piece of your identity from the chaos. You remind yourself, this is weather, not definition. Storms pass, fog lifts, heat fades, and when you treat emotions like weather, you no longer view them as fixed or permanent. You say, there's a heavy fog today, so I'll move slowly. Or, there's lightning in my chest, so I'll give myself space. Sadness becomes drizzle, anger, a thunderclap, numbness, a long gray winter. Anxiety becomes wind, restless everywhere, invisible but real. You stop blaming yourself for the weather. You start preparing for it. This trick builds emotional literacy. It reduces shame. You're not broken. You're in a storm system, and you adapt accordingly. You don't fight the rain. You find shelter. You don't curse the cold. You wrap yourself in warmth. Over time, this language reshapes your internal dialogue. It invites gentleness. It lets you wait without collapsing. because even the fiercest storm is just a passing front in a larger sky. And some days, simply knowing that the weather will change is enough to help you hold on until it does. Write mental letters to future you. Writing mental letters to future you is a powerful survival tactic, one that builds a bridge across time, across suffering, across everything you can't control right now. In the darkest moments, when it feels like you're living in a sealed box of pain, fatigue, and silence, it's easy to forget that there is a future, that this version of you isn't where your story ends. But when you write to the person you're becoming, even if only in your mind, you pull yourself toward them. You remind yourself they're real. You remind yourself why you're fighting. You don't need paper. You close your eyes and speak the words internally, or whisper them into the air. Hey, I don't know where you are now, but I hope you made it out of this place. Today was hard. I was tired. I wanted to give up, but I didn't. I thought of you. I thought of who you might be if I just keep moving. I hope you're safe. I hope you remember this version of me, the one who kept you alive when it felt impossible. You describe the struggle, the wins, the moments that mattered. You imagine them reading it years from now, breath held, heart pounding, whispering, "Thank you." You imagine their strength built from your pain, their peace born from your perseverance, and somehow the act of speaking to that future you makes them more real, more reachable, more worth it. Because if you're writing to them, that means they exist. And if they exist, then you survive. And that truth, spoken into silence, is how the next step begins. Reimagine reality as a challenge issued by the universe. Reimagining reality as a challenge issued by the universe is a powerful psychological reframe that transforms chaos into calling, pain into initiation, and the unbearable into something sacred. In the heart of survival, when everything feels random, cruel, or meaningless, this mindset flips the script. It says, "This isn't happening to destroy me, this is happening to reveal me." You imagine that the universe, whatever that means to you, looked down and chose you, not because you were the weakest, but because you were ready. It handed you this moment, this exact hardship, like a sealed envelope that read, "Let's see what you'll do now." Not out of cruelty, but out of brutal respect. It trusted you with the storm. Suddenly, reality becomes a test of character. The hunger isn't punishment, it's a trial of discipline. The silence isn't emptiness, it's space for you to meet yourself. The fear isn't a trap, it's a signal flare saying, "Pay attention. There is something in you that must be uncovered here." And that shift, it wakes up a deeper version of you, the version that was always waiting for a reason to rise. This reframing doesn't make it easy, it makes it worth something. You're no longer just surviving, you're responding. You're stepping into a role you didn't ask for, but are now determined to embody. And when you imagine that this pain is not random, but a personal challenge from the universe itself, it stirs something ancient and unbreakable, the will to answer it, not with rage, not with surrender, but with the quiet fire of someone who refuses to back down, because they finally realized this was never meant to destroy me, it was meant to awaken me. Sing survival songs you make up. Singing survival songs you make up is a raw, defiant act of psychological resilience, one that pushes back against fear, silence, and isolation with sound that belongs to you. When your world is crumbling, when every breath feels like work, and the loneliness is so loud it becomes a kind of pressure in your skull, you sing, not because things are okay, but because you're still here, and your voice is proof. The songs don't need to rhyme, they don't need to be beautiful, they don't even need to make sense, they just need to exist. You hum into the darkness, you chant while walking, you sing to the fire, the sky, the cracked walls, the ghosts in your mind. You invent lines like, "One more hour, one more breath, I carry storms inside my chest," or "I don't fall, I bend like trees, cold wind, sharp teeth can't break me."
You repeat them, you change them, you make them yours.
These songs serve as rhythm, as prayer, as spell. They organize your thoughts, steady your breathing, drown out despair. When you sing, your body vibrates, your lungs expand, your pulse slows. The sound connects you to life, to movement, to memory. It becomes a heartbeat outside of your own. And the moment you hear yourself, your actual voice rising from the quiet, you remember something sacred. You are not invisible. You are not gone. You are still creating in the middle of destruction. And no matter how brutal the moment is, if you can still sing, even if it's cracked and broken, you are still fighting. And that song is your war cry. Narrate your story to an imaginary child to maintain clarity.
Narrating your story to an imaginary child is a deeply human psychological survival strategy, a way to organize your chaos, soften your fear, and reconnect with your own meaning when the weight of endurance threatens to blur it all. In moments of deep isolation or suffering, thoughts become tangled. You forget what matters. You lose track of progress. But when you imagine a child sitting across from you, wide-eyed, listening, believing, you start to speak in a way that makes your story make sense again. This child can be anyone, a future son or daughter, a young version of yourself, a stranger you might inspire. What matters is that they are innocent, watching you with trust. They don't want drama. They want truth. And so you begin. Today was hard. I wanted to stop, but I didn't. I kept walking. My legs shook and I was afraid, but I made it to the next hour. You describe your feelings, but in words the child could understand. You remove excuses. You simplify. And in doing so, you clarify. Something sacred happens in this act. You speak with honesty, but not hopelessness, because this child needs to believe there's something at the end of your road. You start to see yourself not as a victim of pain, but as a guide through it. You speak the story, and by speaking it, you remember why it matters. And when your voice shakes, when the silence feels too sharp, you look into the eyes of the one who still believes in you, and you say the next line, because you're not just surviving for yourself anymore, you're surviving to show them how. Treat emotional pain like physical injury. Observe, soothe, don't fight. Treating emotional pain like a physical injury is a powerful psychological survival technique that shifts your instinct from resistance to compassion. In extreme conditions, whether it's isolation, trauma, grief, fear, or exhaustion, emotional pain can become overwhelming, and the natural reaction? To push it away, to tense up, to scream silently inside your own mind, get it out, stop feeling this. But what happens when you do that? The pain grows teeth, it tightens its grip, because pain, like a wound, doesn't heal through denial, it heals through care. So you change the approach. You imagine the pain not as a curse, but as an injury, something visible, something real, something that needs attention. You say, this ache in my chest, that's a torn muscle of grief. This emptiness, that's a fracture of hope. And instead of fighting it, you observe it, you see it, you speak gently to it. I know you're here. I know it hurts. I'm with you. You would never scream at a broken leg to hurry up and heal. You wouldn't shame a bleeding hand. You'd cradle it. You'd bandage it. You'd give it time. Emotional pain needs the same grace. You soothe it with breath, stillness, warmth, rest, quiet words. You let it exist without defining you. And slowly, without force, it softens. This isn't weakness. This is strength with tenderness. This is survival through tending, not just toughness. Because when you treat your invisible wounds like real ones, you stop blaming yourself for hurting and start allowing yourself to recover. And that is where true endurance begins. Imagine your strength as an armor growing thicker daily. Imagining your strength as an armor growing thicker every day is a powerful psychological survival metaphor, a living symbol of your invisible progress when the outside world shows no sign of change. In long stretches of suffering, it's easy to feel like you're standing still, that no matter how much you endure, nothing is improving. But when you shift your focus inward, when you see your resilience as armor, you begin to realize you're not the same person you were yesterday. You are becoming stronger, layer by layer. Each act of endurance adds to it. When you fight through fear and don't break, a plate of steel seals across your chest. When you speak against shame or take one more breath in a panic storm, another layer forms over your ribs, your shoulders, your back. When you cry but still rise, your legs are covered in something tougher than bone, will. The armor doesn't make you numb. It makes you ready. It doesn't erase the pain. It says, I can meet it now and still move forward. This visualization is more than fantasy. It's a mindset. It gives meaning to repetition. It reminds you that every hard moment is doing something. Even when no one sees it, even when you feel weak, your armor is growing, dense with memory, forged by pressure. And on the days when you feel the weight of despair, you can place a hand on your heart and whisper, this is where the armor is thickest. Because survival isn't just staying alive, it's becoming untouchable in spirit. And your armor, it isn't shining. It's scorched, battered, earned, and it's still being built. Invent a hierarchy of survival virtues and track them. Inventing a hierarchy of survival virtues and tracking them is a psychological survival method that transforms raw endurance into intentional character building. In a brutal, uncertain, or isolated situation, you can start to feel like you're just reacting, like survival is nothing more than a series of painful decisions strung together. But when you build a personal code of virtues, you stop surviving like a body and start surviving like a soul. You create meaning. You create direction. You begin by defining your virtues, traits you admire, ones you want to embody. Not abstract ideals, but weapons forged in experience, endurance, clarity, patience, courage, kindness, discipline, mercy, silence, alertness, loyalty, grit, maybe 3, maybe 10. You list them, you rank them, you give them names, you treat them like your own commandments, and every day you measure yourself against them. Did I show grit today when I wanted to quit? Was I patient when nothing changed? Did I speak to myself with mercy? Did I remain alert when boredom pressed in? You track them like tallies on a wall or stars carved into wood, not to punish yourself, not to perform, but to remember, to evolve. You see where you bled. You see where you stood taller. You build a record of who you're becoming, not just what you're surviving. This system becomes your compass when the world around you has no map. The virtues are your light, your structure, your spine. And when it feels like no one sees your fight, you look at your list and realize you've been building a warrior of the mind. One choice, one virtue, one day at a time. Flip a mental coin for decisions, then follow your gut. Anyway, flipping a mental coin is a brilliant psychological trick, not to make a decision for you, but to uncover the decision you already want to make. In survival, when you're paralyzed by uncertainty, should I stay here or move, wait or act, rest or push, your mind can get caught in an endless loop of what-ifs and second-guessing. That hesitation becomes dangerous, but when you flip a mental coin, everything sharpens. You don't even need a real coin. You just say, heads, I go, tails, I stay, and you flip it in your mind. The second it lands, even before you register the result, you feel it, that subtle pull, that instinctive ugh or yes, that flash of disappointment or relief. That's your answer. That's your gut speaking before your fear tries to cover it up. Because the truth is, in most situations, you already know what you want or need to do. You're just afraid of owning it. The mental coin trick isn't about luck or leaving your fate to chance. It's about cracking the shell of doubt to let your deeper instincts rise. It bypasses indecision by using illusion to reveal truth. And once you feel that gut response, you don't have to obey the coin. You obey you. You move, you act, you stop overthinking and start trusting the part of you that's been watching, listening, calculating all along. Because in survival, hesitation can kill, but intuition, when respected, can guide you through the dark. Sometimes you just need to trick yourself into hearing it. Mentally travel familiar places to keep memory sharp. Mentally traveling familiar places is a quiet yet profound psychological survival technique, one that keeps your identity intact, your mind engaged, and your memory from softening into the blur of isolation. When you're cut off from people, time, and stimulation, your brain begins to shrink inward. You forget names, rooms, voices, you forget who you were, and that forgetting is dangerous. But when you close your eyes and walk through your old house, your childhood street, a cafe, a school hallway, you light up parts of your brain that remind you, I still exist. You start with one place. You picture the door, the smell, the sound the floor makes beneath your feet. You move through it slowly. There's the chipped tile, the third step that creaks, the plant by the window that always leaned toward the light. You challenge yourself to remember details. You try to touch things. You try to feel them. And as you do, you reclaim the clarity that survival can strip away. This practice doesn't just preserve memory, it preserves you. It reminds you that you've lived a life outside of this moment, that your world was once wide, that your mind is still capable of recalling beauty, complexity, belonging. And each time you visit, you sharpen the blade of attention. You keep your neurons firing. You remind your brain that it is not decaying, it is still alive. In survival, this becomes sacred, the ability to mentally go home, even when you're far from everything that ever felt safe. You don't just remember where you came from, you return to it, and that return keeps your spirit whole. Challenge yourself with mental math or memory drills daily. Challenging yourself with mental math or memory drills each day is a sharp, subtle, psychological survival technique, a way to keep your mind from rusting when the world slows down, shuts off, or becomes unbearably repetitive. In high stress or isolated conditions, your brain doesn't just suffer emotionally, it atrophies. Without stimulation, your mental sharpness dulls, focus fades, memory slips. You begin to forget what you were thinking 5 minutes ago. Days blend, motivation drains, but a daily mental challenge becomes your resistance, a sword against the fog. You don't need paper, you don't need silence, you just need intent. Start with a simple task. Count backward from 1,000 by sevens. Recite the alphabet in reverse. Try to remember what you ate each day for the past week. Multiply double digits in your head. Recall every phone number you ever knew. Visualize walking through your childhood home room by room. Spell long words forward and then backward. These tiny acts of mental resistance say, I am still training, I am still capable. It's not about being perfect, it's about staying awake inside. When your body has nowhere to go, your mind still can. These drills don't just pass time, they preserve you. They slow down cognitive decline, ease anxiety, and give structure to thought. And in environments where you can't control much, this becomes a way to win something each day. You don't need an audience, you don't need a reason. You just need the discipline to stay sharp when everything around you tries to make you dull. Because survival isn't just physical, it's mental endurance. And you train it like a muscle, quietly, daily, relentlessly. Simulate an inner survival coach's voice during hardship. Simulating an inner survival coach's voice during hardship is a raw, focused psychological survival strategy that pulls you out of chaos and puts your mind under command. When you're deep in suffering, exhausted, scared, lost in your own head, the voice inside often turns cruel. You're failing. You can't do this. You're weak. That voice, if left unchecked, becomes the loudest force in the room. But you can drown it out, not with silence, but with leadership. You create a coach, a commander, a force of focus and fight
that speaks with absolute clarity. This isn't a cheerleader. This is the person who gets in your face and reminds you who the hell you are. You hear them as if they're right beside you, calm when you panic, firm when you hesitate, relentless when you want to collapse. Eyes up, breathe slower. You've made it through worse. Focus on one move, just one. You simulate their voice, not soft, not scolding, but steady, tactical, unemotional when emotion floods you. You give this voice a name if you want, a tone. Maybe they're a special forces leader, a parent who never let you give up, a fictional warrior forged from every story that taught you how to fight. And the more often you hear them, the more instinctual they become. When doubt creeps in, the coach cuts through it. Not now, survive this minute, then we talk. Over time, that voice doesn't just guide you, it becomes you, until the day comes when the real storm hits, and you realize there's no longer a separation. The coach is already in your mouth, already moving your feet, and you're already winning. Use opposite emotion acts. Smile when sad to shift mood. Using opposite emotion acts is a deceptively simple but neurologically potent survival technique, one that lets you reverse engineer your mood through your body, even when your heart and mind feel completely disconnected. In survival, you don't always have the luxury of waiting for your emotions to align with your needs. You can't always rest when you're tired. You can't always cry when you're overwhelmed. Sometimes the storm inside has to keep moving, and that's when this trick becomes a tool. Act the opposite of how you feel, and your brain starts catching up. You feel crushed? You stand taller, shoulders back, head up. You want to isolate? You speak, even just a whisper to yourself. You feel like crying? You smile, not a fake, strained grin, but a small, intentional lift of the mouth. You're not mocking your pain, you're hacking your chemistry. The muscles you move, the breath you take, the posture you hold, all send signals to the brain. Things are okay, or at least not collapsing. This isn't denial. You're not pretending you're happy when you're breaking. You're just interrupting the loop. You're creating a crack in the wall of despair. Even forcing a smile for 60 seconds can reduce stress hormones. Even standing up straighter when you want to curl into the ground can shift your mindset from victim to survivor. Opposite action doesn't erase your feelings. It reminds you that you're not trapped by them, that your body can become your ally in changing your inner state. And in survival, that's everything. You don't wait to feel brave, you act brave, and eventually something inside believes you. Use countdowns for task activation. 3, 2, 1, go. Using countdowns for task activation is a deceptively simple yet brutally effective psychological survival tool, especially when fatigue, fear, or apathy freeze your will to act. In survival, hesitation is deadly. Every second you stall, debating, resisting, waiting for the right moment, your body stiffens, your resolve weakens, and your mind begins to unravel in loops of what if. But a countdown slices through all of that. It takes you from thinking to moving. You don't give yourself time to argue. You say the numbers, out loud if you can. 3, 2, 1, go. And then you act. No discussion, no emotion, just momentum. Whether it's standing up when you're aching, stepping into the cold, facing a fear, drinking water, or pushing through a pain barrier, countdown becomes the ignition key. It overrides hesitation and forces activation. Why does it work? Because your brain responds to finality. A countdown implies a launch, a non-negotiable shift from waiting to doing. It snaps your mind into decision. It gives structure where there's only resistance. And most importantly, it's fast. You don't let yourself spiral. You create a window of clarity and you jump through it. This trick is pure survival psychology. It builds a habit of action. It silences fear before it grows teeth. And over time, every 3, 2, 1 becomes a promise kept, a tiny victory, a break in the paralysis. You don't have to feel ready. You don't even have to believe in yourself. You just have to count. and go, because sometimes survival is just 5 syllables away from transformation. Repeat the phrase, I have done harder things. Repeating the phrase, I have done harder things, is a psychological survival mantra that cuts through panic, fatigue, and self-doubt like a blade. It's not about arrogance. It's about anchoring yourself to proof, your own. When you feel like you're at your breaking point, when the task ahead seems impossible, when every part of your body and mind screams, I can't, you answer with I have. This phrase is a defiant reminder. You speak it aloud. You whisper it when your throat is tight. You repeat it like a drum beat. I have done harder things. I have survived worse. I have faced more and still move forward. You don't need someone else to believe in you. You are the evidence. You carry it in your scars, in the stories you never told, in the moments no one saw you fight but you. Every time you repeat it, your brain is reminded of your resilience, of the night you didn't sleep but still got up, of the pain you endured and learned from, of the heartbreak you carried and still breathed through. You're not lying to yourself. You're remembering. This phrase becomes armor. It dulls fear. It silences hesitation. It tells your body, we've been here. We've gone deeper. We're not new to this. And when doubt pushes against you with everything it's got, this phrase becomes a wall it cannot pass. You don't need the pain to disappear. You just need to remember who you are underneath it. I have done harder things, and now you're about to do one more. Visualize worst-case scenarios, then reduce them with logic. Visualizing worst-case scenarios and then shrinking them with logic is a bold, psychological survival tactic that disarms fear by facing it head-on. Most people try to avoid imagining the worst. They think it will make the fear worse. But fear thrives in shadows. It feeds on vagueness, on the unknown. When you drag it into the light and study it like a blueprint, piece by piece, you stop letting it control you. You go from dreading what could happen to managing it. You start by letting the fear speak. What's the worst thing that could happen here? You don't flinch. You picture it, all of it. Maybe you lose everything. Maybe you're alone longer than you can imagine. Maybe the pain doesn't stop. Let the image rise. Let it shake you. Then you zoom in with reason. You ask, how likely is this really? If it did happen, what would I do? Could I endure it? Have others endured worse? Then you dismantle it. You break it into parts. Okay, if that happened, what would be step one? What would I still have? What would I still control? You start to see exits, back doors, tools, strength. The terror begins to shrink, not because the risk is gone, but because you're no longer helpless before it. You've rehearsed, you've prepared, you've taken its power. This isn't negativity, it's mastery. You don't let fear loom undefined in the corner of your mind. You pull it forward, dissect it, and calmly say, I can survive this. And if I can survive that, I can survive today. Treat setbacks like weather, passing, not permanent. Treating setbacks like weather is a psychological survival mindset that prevents temporary failure from becoming a permanent identity. When things go wrong, when you fall apart, make a mistake, freeze under pressure, or simply can't go on for one more hour, it's easy to spiral into shame. I've failed. I'm weak. This proves I'm not enough. But when you shift your view and say, this is weather, everything softens. You stop seeing the moment as who you are and start seeing it as something simply moving through you. Storms roll in, storms roll out. They do not last forever. They do not define the landscape they pass over, and neither do setbacks define you. You can feel the failure. You can acknowledge it. You can sit in the rain without pretending it's sunshine, but you remind yourself, this is not the new climate. This is a front. You don't quit in the storm. You don't build your self-worth in the flood. You hunker down, breathe, and wait for the sky to shift. This mindset keeps you moving because when you treat setbacks as permanent, you stop, you surrender. But when you treat them like weather, you endure, you adapt, You keep walking through the wind because you know there will be dry ground again. You don't blame the sky. You don't curse yourself for getting wet. You recognize that storms come, and so does clarity. Every survival story has moments of collapse. They don't disqualify you. They mark the turning points. You are not the storm. You are the ground it passes over, and you're still here. Mentally rehearse positive endings several times a day. Mentally rehearsing positive endings throughout the day is a powerful act of emotional survival, a way to remind your brain that something good is still possible, even when you're buried in fear, exhaustion, or despair. In prolonged hardship, the mind naturally defaults to worst-case outcomes. It's a survival instinct, but left unchecked, that instinct becomes a trap, training your brain to expect collapse instead of endurance. That's why this technique matters. It bends your inner narrative back toward hope, deliberately, vividly, repeatedly. You close your eyes, you see it, not vaguely, clearly. You see yourself surviving, healing, laughing again. You visualize your hands clean, your body fed, your voice calm. You imagine waking up in safety, hearing someone say, "You made it." You picture the moment you tell someone the story, not from inside the storm, but after it. You rehearse the smile you'll wear when the weight finally lifts. You see your name on something new, papers, a door, a passport, a letter you write with steady hands. And then you do it again, later that day, and again. Each time you etch it deeper into your nervous system. You train your brain to expect a future worth living for. You give your body something to move toward, not just away from danger, but toward meaning. It's not fantasy, it's psychological oxygen. It reclaims your imagination from fear, and when practiced daily, it becomes more than a ritual. It becomes a form of emotional resistance, because no matter how brutal the moment is, you still hold the pen, and you're still writing a future you'll be proud to reach. Name it to tame it. Label thoughts instead of fusing with them. Name it to tame it is a powerful survival-level psychological tool, a way to separate yourself from overwhelming thoughts before they become your identity. In moments of stress, fear, or despair, thoughts arrive fast and loud. I can't do this. I'm worthless. I'm trapped. I'm doomed. And before you even realize it, you believe them. You become them. But this technique is your exit route. You don't argue. You don't deny. You just label. Instead of fusing with the thought, letting it swallow you whole, you step back and say, "Ah, that's the voice of fear," or "This is the shame story again," or even, "That's just catastrophic thinking showing up." The moment you name it, you are no longer drowning in it. You are observing it, and the observer is always stronger than the storm. Your brain is a thought generator. It produces noise, images, warnings. That doesn't mean it's always telling the truth. Thoughts are not commands. They are not facts. They are events in the mind. And when you start naming them instead of fusing with them, you regain your power. That's the critic. That's the panic spiral. That's not me. It's just passing through. This shift creates just enough space to breathe, to choose, to move forward without having to feel better first. You don't need to kill the thought. You just need to call it by its real name. And in that naming, you tame it, not with force, but with awareness. You remind yourself, I am not my fear. I am the one noticing it. And that changes everything. Make a list of everything you still control, however small. Making a list of everything you still control, no matter how small, is a grounding psychological survival strategy that reconnects you to your agency when life feels stripped of choices. In crisis, the mind zooms in on everything that's been taken: freedom, safety, time, connection, comfort. The result is a crushing sense of helplessness. You begin to feel like a passenger in your own life, dragged through each moment by forces you can't influence. But control still exists. It's just quieter, smaller, hidden in the details. And when you start listing it, you start reclaiming yourself. You can't change the weather, but you can control how tightly you wrap your coat. You can't control how long this suffering lasts, but you can choose to breathe slower right now. You can blink with purpose, clench and release your fists, whisper a phrase that keeps you centered, decide to stand, decide to rest, decide to think one helpful thought instead of a harmful one. The list begins to grow. I control how I sit. I control what I focus on for the next 10 seconds. I control the next word I speak, even if it's just to myself. I control whether I give this pain meaning. I control whether I name this day something sacred. I control whether I look up instead of down. This list isn't about power. It's about ownership. Every item on it is a reminder that you are not gone, that you are not broken, that inside everything you can't change still lives a tiny, burning core of choice. And that's where your survival begins. Again and again and again.